Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto saved the Germa kingdom and fell in love with Vinsmoke Reiju. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, the golden maelstrom. The air in the grand hall was thick enough to swallow, heavy with the cloying sweetness of sugar and the sharp, metallic tang of impending bloodshed. Vinsmoke Reiju kept her expression placid, a mask of aristocratic indifference she had perfected over 2 decades. Her posture was immaculate, her hands resting lightly on her lap, but beneath the table, her fingers were clenched so tightly her knuckles were bone white. The music had stopped. The laughter had died. All that remained was the rhythmic, guttural chewing of the monster at the head of the table. Charlotte Lin, the Yonko known as Big Mom, was no longer the jovial, terrifyingly manic host of the wedding party. The facade had crumbled, revealing the bottomless abyss of her rage. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, were fixed on Reiju's younger brother. "You thought you could trick me?" Big Mom's voice was a low growl, a promise of earthquakes and tsunamis. "You thought you could bring your pathetic army of tin soldiers into my territory, marry my beautiful pudding, and assassinate me at my own party?" Sanji stood alone, his black suit looking more like funeral attire by the second. His face was a canvas of shock and betrayal, his gaze flicking between the weeping form of his would-be bride, Pudding, and the leering faces of her siblings. The Straw Hat Chef had walked into a den of lions to save them, his family, and this was his reward. A pistol pressed to his temple by the woman he thought he was saving. Reiju felt a cold, familiar stone settle in her gut. It was the feeling of a perfect plan, a brilliant strategy, disintegrating into a bloody, ignominious end. Her father, Vinsmoke Judge, sat rigid beside her. The grand architect of their resurgence, the king of Germa 66, looked pale. His meticulous calculations, his lifetime of ambition, all of it had been predicated on a successful alliance or a successful assassination. He had accounted for everything except the depth of a Yonko's treachery. He had been outplayed. "It seems the stories of your cunning were exaggerated, Judge," Charlotte Perispero said, his long tongue flicking out to taste a drop of candy sweat from his brow. His candy creations, once festive decorations, now formed the bars of their cage. Hardened, razor-sharp candy spears protruded from the walls. A massive, sticky wave of it blocked the only exit, trapping the Germa delegation and their small retinue of guards. "Silence," Judge hissed, his voice tight with fury and denial. His eyes darted around the room, assessing the threats. Charlotte Katakuri, silent and imposing, stood behind Big Mom, his arms crossed. His crimson gaze swept over them, and Reiju felt a prickle on her skin, the unnerving sensation of being observed by a predator that knew her next move before she did. Charlotte's smoothie towered nearby, her hand resting on the hilt of her massive sword. The full might of the Big Mom pirates' command was arrayed against them. Neji, ever the hothead, gritted his teeth. "Father! Give the order. We can fight our way out." His blue raid suit canister was clipped to his belt, a useless trinket. They had come under the pretense of peace, their suits were on their persons, but activating them and fighting through this many top-tier combatants was suicide. "Don't be a fool, Neji," Ichiji, the eldest, said, his tone as cold and detached as ever. Even now, facing annihilation, his face was an unreadable mask. "The tactical disadvantage is absolute." Yanji just sweated, his usual boorish confidence completely gone, replaced by the wide-eyed fear of a cornered animal. Reiju's gaze drifted back to Sanji. Her failure. Her sweet, kind, foolish little brother. Their mother's only true success. He had retained his heart, and that heart had led him right back into the jaws of the trap he'd spent a lifetime escaping. She had put his bounty back in circulation, hoping to draw him here, hoping he would be their salvation. Instead, she had only doomed him alongside them. A bitter, acidic taste, one that had nothing to do with her own poison, rose in her throat. Wedding. Cake. Big Mom suddenly shrieked, her mood swinging violently. My wedding cake. Ruined. My party. Ruined. My plans. Ruined. She slammed a fist on the table, and the entire rooftop chateau shuddered. Cracks spiderwebbed across the floor. For that, you will all die. Slowly. Your screams will be the music for my real celebration. On cue, dozens of Big Mom's children and subordinates leveled their flintlocks. The clicks of hammers being cocked echoed in the sudden silence. This was it. The end of the Vinsmoke line. The death of a dream of conquest that had spanned generations. Judge closed his eyes, a tremor of pure, undiluted rage running through his body. His legacy would be a cautionary tale told by pirates. Reiju did not close her eyes. She would meet her end as she had lived, watching, observing, a silent witness to the cruelty of the world. She watched the candy men aim. She watched Katakuri's impassive face. She watched Sanji, who, even now, was trying to shift his body to shield her. The idiot. The wonderful, hopeless idiot. A single tear escaped her carefully constructed dam, tracing a path down her cheek. It felt hot, alien. Then the sky broke. It wasn't a sound at first, but a feeling. A deep, gut-wrenching vibration that had nothing to do with Big Mom's tantrum. It was a high-frequency shriek that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air. Everyone, pirate and royalty alike, looked up. Above the chateau, the cheerful blue sky of Whole Cake Island was being violated. A jagged, black line, like a crack in glass, had appeared. It wasn't a cloud. It was a fissure in reality itself, spiderwebbing outwards, leaking a light that was not sunlight. It was a brilliant, chaotic gold, pulsing with an energy that felt utterly alien. It was sharp, wild, and powerful, a stark contrast to the heavy, oppressive spiritual pressure, the haki, that saturated the room. What is that? Yanji stammered, pointing a trembling finger. Perispero licked his lips, his confident smirk faltering. Peroran. I didn't make that. The crack widened, and the shriek intensified, bending light and sound around it. Then, from the heart of the golden fissure, something was ejected. It wasn't a graceful emergence. It was a violent, chaotic expulsion, like a stone spat from a volcano. A figure, trailing black smoke and flickering embers of that same golden light, tumbled through the air, plummeting towards the chateau. He was a splash of orange and black against the sky, a meteor of flesh and blood. He fell, end over end, his descent uncontrolled. The figure slammed into the roof of the chateau with a deafening crash, shattering the ornate sugar-glass tiles and reinforced stone like an eggshell. He plowed through the floor and landed in the center of the grand hall with an impact that shook the entire structure to its foundations. The air exploded outwards in a concussive wave, kicking up a storm of dust, splintered wood, and pulverized cake. The pirates holding guns were thrown from their feet. Reiju and her brothers braced themselves, their raid suit boots magnetizing to the floor to keep them anchored. Silence descended once more, thick with dust and confusion. In the center of the room, lying in a newly formed crater, was a young man. He was blond, with sun-kissed skin and strange whisker-like marks on his cheeks. He wore tattered black pants and the shredded remains of an orange jacket. His body was a roadmap of abuse, cuts, deep bruises, and a nasty-looking gash on his forehead that bled freely down his face. He was unconscious, or so it seemed. An intruder? Charlotte Daifuku growled, rubbing his lamp-like belly. Kill him. But no one moved. They were all staring. Not just at the stranger, but at the energy that was rolling off him in waves. It was the same golden light from the sky, now flickering around him like a dying flame. It felt alive. Warm and fierce and utterly untamed. The man groaned, a low, pained sound. He pushed himself up onto one knee, his head bowed. His breathing was ragged. He looked like he'd just run a marathon through hell. "Where?" he rasped, his voice rough. He slowly lifted his head, his eyes struggling to focus. They were a startling, vibrant blue, like the deepest ocean. His gaze swept across the scene, taking in the opulent, candy-coated room, the monstrously large woman, the diverse and bizarre-looking pirates, and finally, the family in matching white outfits, held at gunpoint. He saw the pistols. He saw Judge's rigid pride, the brother's fear, and Sanji's defiant stance. Then his eyes met Reiju's. He saw the tear track on her cheek, the silent resignation in her gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. This stranger, this boy who fell from the sky, knew nothing of their politics, their ambitions, their betrayals. He saw only one, universally understood truth: a family was about to be executed. Something shifted in his eyes. The disorientation vanished, replaced by a clarity as sharp and cold as a winter morning. The flickering golden aura around him didn't just stabilize, it surged. "Hey!" His voice was no longer weak. It was calm, steady, and carried an authority that defied his wounded state. He slowly rose to his feet, his blue eyes locking onto Big Mom. "What do you think you're doing?" Big Mom, who had been momentarily stunned, erupted in laughter. It was a horrible, grating sound. "Who are you, boy? Did you fall from the sky just to die with them?" The stranger didn't answer. He took a single step forward, placing himself between the Vinsmokes and the sea of guns. He raised a hand, palm open, in a gesture that was both a plea and a command. "Let them go," he said, his voice ringing with an unnerving lack of fear. "Just walk away. No one else has to get hurt." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. Perospero was the first to recover, his grin returning, sharper than ever. "He's delirious. Candy Maiden," he commanded, and a wave of hardened, sharp candy lances shot from the wall, aimed at impaling the newcomer from a dozen different angles. Reiju's breath hitched. It was over. He was brave, but he was a fool. The blonde man didn't even look. He just moved. It wasn't a blur of motion. One moment he was there, standing before them. The next, he was gone. A series of rapid-fire sonic booms cracked the air. Clang. 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 The sound of metal on metal, of knuckles on steel. Before anyone could even process what had happened, he was back in his original position, his posture unchanged. But now, every single pirate who had been holding a gun was groaning on the floor, clutching a broken wrist or a dislocated shoulder. Their flintlocks were scattered across the floor, many of them bent into scrap metal. He had disarmed over 30 armed men in the span of a single heartbeat. A dead silence fell over the hull. Even Katakuri's eyes widened slightly. That speed, it was faster than anything he had ever seen. It wasn't the observational precognition of hockey or the twitch reflex of a master martial artist. It was as if the man had teleported, 30 times at once. Reiju stared, her mind, trained in the cold logic of science, struggling to comprehend the data. Impossible. The human body had limits. Muscle contraction speed, nerve impulse velocity, what she had just witnessed defied all known biological principles. The stranger ignored the stunned pirates and kept his eyes on Big Mom. "I won't ask again. Insolent gnat." Big Mom roared, rising to her full, monstrous height. Her shadow fell over him, a promise of oblivion. "You dare lay a hand on my children? My crew?" She drew back a massive fist, coated in the dark, shimmering energy of armament hockey. "Die." Her punch descended like a mountain falling from the sky, aimed at turning the blonde man into a red paste on her chateau floor. The man didn't flinch. He simply raised his right hand. A swirling ball of blue light appeared in his palm, spinning with a high-pitched hum that sounded like 1,000 birds chirping. It was no bigger than his hand, a seemingly insignificant sphere against the Yonko's colossal fist. Rasengan, he yelled, thrusting it forward. The impact was not what Reiju expected. There was no cataclysmic explosion. Instead, the moment the blue sphere touched Big Mom's hockey-coated knuckles, it was like a drill hitting solid rock. A grinding, tearing sound filled the air. The sphere expanded, digging into her fist, spinning with impossible force. Big Mom's eyes bulged. Pain. For the first time, she felt genuine, searing pain. Her armament hockey, capable of blocking cannonballs and shattering castles, was being eroded. The spinning energy tore through her defense and ground into her flesh. She bellowed, a sound of pure agony and outrage, and stumbled back, clutching her hand. The skin was raw, shredded, and bleeding, burned in a perfect spiral pattern. The entire Big Mom crew stared in disbelief. Their mother, their invincible queen, had been wounded by a no-name boy with a strange glowing ball. That energy, Ichiji murmured, his voice tight. It's not hockey. What is it? Yanji asked, his jaw slack. I don't know, Judge breathed, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. This boy, this weapon, had fallen directly into his lap. The stranger didn't press his advantage. He stood his ground, the spinning ball of light vanishing from his hand. He was breathing a little harder now, the exertion showing. This is your last chance, he said, his voice tired but firm. That was the final straw. The insult was too great, the wound too deep. Big Mom's rage transcended sanity. Kill him. Kill him now, she shrieked, her voice cracking the very air. Perispero. Smoothie. Katakuri. Tear him apart. Perispero reacted first, his face contorted in a furious sneer. I'll turn you into a candy statue for all to see. Candy wave. A tsunami of thick, viscous syrup surged across the floor, aiming to engulf the stranger and harden around him instantly. At the same time, Smoothie drew her massive sword, a dangerous light in her eyes. I'll wring you dry, she shouted, leaping forward. From behind, faster than a bullet, a thick, white tendril of machi shot forward, aimed at the stranger's leg. Katakuri was done observing. The blond man was beset on three sides by the sweet commanders. It was a checkmate. No single person could handle three Yonko commanders at once. He took a deep breath, and the golden energy that had been flickering around him exploded into a roaring inferno. It wasn't fire, it was a tangible, visible pressure, a cloak of raw power that wrapped around him like a second skin. His eyes bled from blue to a piercing crimson, the pupils turning to vertical slits. The whisker marks on his cheeks darkened, becoming stark and feral. His teeth elongated into fangs. He crossed his index and middle fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a series of smokeless puffs, two perfect duplicates of the man appeared beside him. The Vinsmoke stared, dumbfounded. They weren't illusions. Reiju's scientifically trained eyes saw three distinct, identical biological signatures. It was impossible. Human cloning took years in a vat, not an instant on a battlefield. One clone, grinning ferally, met Smoothie's charge. The second clone turned to face Perispero's candy wave. The original, his crimson eyes fixed on the incoming machi, didn't even move. The clone fighting Smoothie didn't bother with finesse. It simply met her giant sword with a forearm coated in the bubbling golden chakra. The sound of their clash was a thunderclap. The clone was pushed back, but it held. It was matching a Yonko commander's strength. The second clone faced the candy tsunami and held up a hand. The golden energy swirled, condensing. Wind style, Rasengan. A variation appeared. The familiar blue sphere was there, but now four sharp, blade-like protrusions spun around it, emitting a deafening, high-pitched shriek. The clone slammed it into the approaching wave of syrup. There was no collision. The moment the shrieking sphere touched the candy, the wave disintegrated. It wasn't blasted apart, it was shredded on a microscopic level, atomized into a fine, sugary mist that filled the air. The attack continued, carving a deep trench through the chateau floor and forcing Perospero to leap aside, his face a mask of horror. He had never seen anything that could so utterly negate his devil fruit power. Meanwhile, Katakuri's machi wrapped around the original's leg. The commander pulled, expecting to throw his opponent off balance, but it was like pulling on a mountain. The blond man didn't budge. He just looked down at the appendage. "Sticky," he commented, his voice a low growl. Then, a massive, spectral arm, formed from the same bubbling golden energy, erupted from his back. It was colossal, larger than Smoothie, and it swiped down at Katakuri with the force of a natural disaster. Katakuri's eyes widened in alarm. He abandoned his hold and flowed backwards, his body turning to machi to avoid the blow. The golden arm slammed into the ground where he'd been standing, and the entire rooftop chateau tilted precariously. The floor buckled, shattering under a force that was beyond physical. "He is a monster," Niji whispered, his own arrogance completely forgotten. He was witnessing a level of power he hadn't known was possible. "He is magnificent," Judge corrected, his voice filled with a terrifying, feverish awe. Reiju couldn't speak. She was watching the fight with a detached fascination that bordered on shock. This man, this boy, was fighting three of a Yonko's strongest children to a standstill. But he was just one person, and he was already wounded. He was buying them time, but for what? As if hearing her thoughts, the man, Naruto, she had heard him yell his own name for one of his attacks, glanced back at them over his shoulder. His crimson eyes met hers. There was no calculation in them, no arrogance. Just a raw, primal determination. "Go," he roared, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Get out of here. Now." The command snapped them out of their stupor. Judge was the first to react, his mind racing. He's right. He's created an opening. To the ship. Move. He slammed a button on his belt. With a hiss of hydraulics, his black and gold raid suit enveloped him. Garbed as the Germa king, Garuda, he ignited the jets on his boots. Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji followed suit, their bodies encased in their signature red, blue, and green combat gear. "Reiju!" Judge barked. She didn't hesitate. She activated her own suit, the pink armor of poison pink materializing around her. The world sharpened, her physical senses enhanced. She felt the power coursing through her modified body. "Sanji," she cried, turning to her brother. But Sanji was already in motion, his leg wreathed in flame. Diable jam. He wasn't running. He was covering their retreat, kicking away any of the lesser pirates who tried to interfere. "We can't just leave him." Sanji yelled, his gaze fixed on the golden-cloaked stranger who was now locked in a furious, high-speed exchange of blows with Katakuri. "He is our only chance, you fool." Judge retorted, grabbing Sanji's arm. "Do not waste the opportunity this creature has given us. We retreat and regroup." The Vinsmokes and Sanji blasted through the shattered wall, their boot jets propelling them into the open air. The Germa kingdom's snail ships were moored below, a floating fortress waiting for its commanders. Back in the hall, Naruto felt them leave. Good. His job was almost done. He was running on fumes. The energy he was using wasn't his own, it was Kurama's, a final, desperate reserve granted to him after their last battle. A battle he couldn't even fully remember. There were flashes of light, a clash that tore the world apart, and then, falling. He grunted as one of Katakuri's machi fists, hardened with haki, slammed into his side. The chakra cloak absorbed most of the blow, but the force still cracked a rib. He countered with a kick, but Katakuri's body morphed around it, his future sight making him maddeningly difficult to hit. Smoothie had regrouped and was coming at him again, her sword glowing. Perospero was creating an army of candy golems. He was being overwhelmed. Kit, you're fading, a deep, rumbling voice echoed in his mind. Kurama. The fox sounded exhausted. That final clash, it did more than just send us here. We're almost empty. Just a little longer, Kurama, Naruto thought back, gritting his teeth. They need more time. He needed something big. Something to end this now. He dodged under another of Katakuri's attacks, putting distance between himself and the commanders. He brought his hands together, the two clones beside him doing the same. The golden chakra cloak surged, flaring with blinding intensity. From his back, not one, but 9 massive chakra tails erupted, whipping through the air like furious golden serpents. Then, the energy began to coalesce, forming the skeletal ribcage of a truly gargantuan beast around him. A fox's skull materialized, its spectral jaws opening in a silent roar. The sheer pressure it exuded made the very stones of the chateau groan. What is that thing? Yanji shrieked from the deck of their ascending ship, looking back at the chateau. The Vinsmokes had made it to the main deck of their largest snail carrier, the kingdom of Germa. They watched as a colossal, golden spectral fox began to form around the lone figure on the rooftop, its power making the air for miles around them tremble. A devil fruit? Ichiji wondered aloud, his voice devoid of its usual certainty. No, it can't be. It's something else entirely. Reiju just stared, her heart pounding against her ribs. The raw, overwhelming scale of it was beyond anything she had ever imagined. It dwarfed Big Mom. It was the power of a god, not a man. And he was using it to save them. Them. A family of assassins and would-be conquerors he didn't even know. On the rooftop, Katakuri, for the first time in a long time, felt a sliver of genuine doubt. He saw the future, a storm of golden energy that they could not block. An attack that would not just defeat them, but obliterate the entire chateau. Naruto, encased in the golden skeleton of the Kurama avatar, raised a massive clawed hand. This is over. But before he could strike, the last of his strength gave out. The exhaustion from the Fourth Great Ninja War, the dimensional transit, and this new, desperate battle all crashed down on him at once. The golden avatar flickered, then dissolved into nothingness. The 9 tails vanished. The chakra cloak receded, leaving him standing there in his tattered clothes, swaying on his feet. The crimson in his eyes faded back to a weary, exhausted blue. He had nothing left. Katakuri saw his chance. He didn't hesitate. He shot forward, his fist ready to end it. But Naruto had one last trick. He fell backwards, off the edge of the crumbling rooftop, plummeting towards the sea of clouds below. As he fell, he made a final hand sign. In a puff of smoke, a single shadow clone appeared in his place. It lasted only a second before Katakuri's fist passed through it, dissipating it into nothing. It was just enough of a distraction. Naruto's real body fell through the air. He saw the massive Germa ship rising not far from him. With the last dregs of his strength, he pushed a whisper of chakra to his feet and kicked off the side of the chateau, launching himself sideways. He soared through the air, a broken arrow, and crashed onto the cold, metallic deck of the Germa ship with a sickening thud. The Vinsmoke siblings, who had been watching the spectacle from the railing, flinched at the impact. They turned to see him lying sprawled on the deck, unmoving. The world behind them, Big Mom's enraged screams, the chaos of Tato land, began to fade as their ship ascended, breaking through the clouds into the clear sky. Silence. The 5 of them stood there, their advanced battle suits gleaming in the sun, and stared at the unconscious form of the boy who had just saved them. He looked so much smaller now, without the terrifying golden aura. Just a young man, wounded and bleeding, his chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. Yanji was the first to speak, breaking the spell. Holy crap, he breathed, his voice a mixture of fear and excitement. Did you see that? He beat up Big Mom. He fought the sweet commanders. That was insane. He didn't win, Ichiji stated, his red armor glinting. He walked closer, his expression analytical. He created a diversion and fled. A strategically sound maneuver, but not a victory. A diversion that saved our lives, brother, Niji countered, deactivating his helmet. His face was a complex mixture of resentment and grudging admiration. If he hadn't shown up, we'd be dead. Judge slowly approached the boy, his own helmet retracting to reveal a face alight with burning, obsessive ambition. He looked down at Naruto not as a person, but as a singularity, a variable that had just shattered every equation he had ever known. Power like that, it was the key. The key to everything. To reclaiming the North Blue, to crushing his rivals, to building an empire that would make the world government tremble. His body, Judge murmured, his eyes gleaming. His energy source. It's not a devil fruit. It's biological. Innate. Imagine if we could replicate it. Imagine an army of soldiers with that power. Sanji, who had been silent this whole time, finally snapped. He's not a thing to be studied, he snarled, stepping between his father and Naruto. He just saved all of your worthless lives. The least you can do is show him some gratitude. Gratitude is a currency for the weak, Judge said dismissively, not even gracing Sanji with a look. Power is the only currency that matters. And he gestured to Naruto, is a treasure trove. Reiju ignored them all. She walked forward, her pink armor dissolving away, leaving her in her simple white dress. She knelt beside the unconscious stranger, the cold metal of the deck seeping through the thin fabric. His face was slack with exhaustion, streaked with blood and grime. He looked peaceful. Younger, somehow. She saw the raw power he had wielded, a force of nature that could level islands. But she also remembered his eyes when he first saw them. The immediate, instinctive protectiveness. The defiance he showed to a Yonko on their behalf. He hadn't asked who they were. He hadn't asked if they were good or bad. He had simply seen people in danger and thrown himself in the way. It was the most illogical, irrational, and profoundly human thing she had ever witnessed. Her hand, adorned with its elegant glove, hovered over his chest, hesitating for just a moment. Her brothers and father watched her, their expressions a mixture of awe, suspicion, and cold, hard calculation. They had been saved from certain death, their grand ambitions preserved by a miracle that fell from the sky. But as her fingers finally rested on his chest, feeling the faint but steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, Reiju knew this was no simple miracle. They had just invited a force far more unpredictable, far more dangerous, and perhaps, far more revolutionary than any Yonko or admiral into their perfectly ordered, scientific world. The golden maelstrom had passed, leaving a quiet enigma in its wake. And the future of the Germa kingdom, for better or for worse, was now tied to the boy who slept at her feet. Chapter 2, The Kingdom of Science. The first thing to return was sound. A steady, rhythmic beeping, as clean and sterile as the scent that followed it, a sharp, antiseptic smell that scrubbed the air of all personality. It was the scent of a hospital, but colder, lacking the underlying scent of human frailty. Naruto's eyelids felt heavy, glued shut by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that went far beyond mere physical exertion. This was a soul weariness, a draining of the very wellspring of his being. He remembered falling. He remembered a final, desperate push. He remembered cold metal rushing up to meet him. Before that, chaos. A monstrous woman, a man who saw the future, and a family in white. Before that, light. So much light. A clash with Sasuke that had cracked the sky, a final, desperate gambit to seal away a goddess, and the horrifying sensation of being torn from his world. Kurama. He thought, reaching for the familiar, grumpy presence in the back of his mind. There was only a faint, distant echo. A flicker of warmth, like the last ember of a bonfire, but it was sleeping, hibernating, gathering what little strength it had left. He was on his own. With a groan that scraped his raw throat, Naruto forced his eyes open. The world swam into focus in blurry shapes and muted colors. He was in a room of gleaming white and polished silver. Tubes and wires, thin as spider silk, were attached to his arms, feeding glowing liquids into his veins. The beeping came from a monitor beside him, its screen displaying a cascade of complex data he couldn't begin to decipher. "You're awake." The voice was calm, melodic, with a hint of something he couldn't quite place, a detached curiosity, perhaps. He turned his head, the movement feeling sluggish and heavy. Vinsmoke Reiju sat in a sleek, metallic chair beside his bed. She had changed out of her dress and into a simple, practical uniform of white pants and a light gray tunic. Her pink hair was the only splash of vibrant color in the sterile environment. Her face held the same placid, aristocratic beauty he'd seen at the party, but now, without the imminent threat of death, her watchfulness was more pronounced. She observed him the way a scientist observes an anomaly, with intense focus and carefully controlled emotion. "Where," he managed, his voice a dry rasp. "You are aboard the Kingdom of Germa, the primary vessel of our mobile nation," she answered, her tone even. "You are in our most advanced medical bay. The nutrient drips are accelerating your cellular regeneration." She gestured to the IVs. "Your healing rate is remarkable. Even without them, your tissues were repairing themselves at a rate that defies conventional biology." Naruto pushed himself up, ignoring a dull ache in his ribs. He ripped the tubes from his arms with a practiced motion, the small punctures closing almost instantly. The monitor beside him let out a series of frantic beeps before flatlining a few of his readings. Reiju's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "I would advise against that. We are still monitoring your unique energy signature." "My what?" He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling the cold floor beneath his feet. He was wearing a simple pair of gray pants and a loose-fitting shirt, not his own clothes. He felt a pang of loss for his tattered jacket. It was the last thing he had from home. "The power you used," she clarified, rising from her chair. She moved with a fluid grace that was almost unnerving. "The golden aura. The clones. The spinning sphere of energy that wounded Charlotte Linlin. My father's scientists have been analyzing the residual particles you left in the chateau. They call it chakra. An unknown form of bioenergy." Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, a familiar habit. "Yeah, that's what it's called. Everyone has it where I'm from." He looked around the room again, truly taking it in. There were no windows. Just cold, functional metal. "So, this Germa, you're the family I saved, right? The ones in the white suits." "We are," she confirmed. "I am Vinsmoke Reiju. The family you saw consisted of my father, Judge, and my 3 younger brothers, Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji. And of course, Sanji." At the mention of Sanji's name, a flicker of something, sadness, regret, crossed her face before it was smoothed away. "So the cook is your brother," Naruto mused. "He talked about you guys. Didn't have many nice things to say." He gave her a direct look. "From what I saw, I can't blame him." Reiju didn't flinch at the accusation. "Sanji is an idealist. He lives in a world of chivalry and kindness. The Germa kingdom lives in a world of science, strategy, and power. The two are not compatible." "Yeah, well, it looked like your world of power was about to get wiped out by a giant lady with a sweet tooth," Naruto shot back, his voice sharper than he intended. He was tired, confused, and a long way from home. His patience was thin. A hint of a smile touched Reiju's lips, a small, surprising thing. "An astute observation. For which we are in your debt. Charlotte Linlin, or Big Mom, is one of the 4 emperors, the most powerful pirates who rule the latter half of the Grand Line. To challenge one is to invite annihilation. To wound one, is unprecedented. Emperors. Grand Line. Pirates." The words were familiar from stories he'd heard, but the context was all wrong. This world was vast and strange. So you're pirates? We are royalty without land, she corrected smoothly. A kingdom of science. We align ourselves with whomever is most advantageous. In this case, it was a mistake. One that you, inexplicably, rectified. She took a step closer, her violet eyes studying his face. The question is, why? You don't know us. You had nothing to gain. You threw yourself into a battle against a Yonko for a family of strangers. Naruto met her gaze. He thought about the tear track he'd seen on her cheek. He thought about the look of despair on Sanji's face. He thought about a lifetime of being judged, of being seen as a monster or a weapon. And he thought about the simple, unwavering belief Irika-sensei had placed in him, the belief that he was a person worth saving. You were in trouble, he said, as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. That's it. That's the whole reason. Reiju was silent for a long moment, her analytical mind trying to process a motive so utterly devoid of self-interest. It was a variable that didn't fit any of her father's equations. She found it fascinating. And deeply unsettling. The doors to the med bay hissed open with pneumatic precision, cutting the moment short. Vinsmoke Judge strode into the room, his presence immediately commanding the space. He was in his full regal attire, a golden-maned helmet tucked under one arm, his long cape sweeping the floor behind him. He radiated an aura of immense, unshakable arrogance. Flanking him were his sons, Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji, all clad in their pristine white uniforms. Ichiji was impassive as stone, Niji had a cocky smirk plastered on his face, and Yanji looked like he was barely restraining himself from bouncing on the balls of his feet. So, the specimen is awake, Judge declared, his voice a deep baritone that resonated with authority. He stopped a few feet from Naruto, his eyes raking over him not with gratitude, but with the keen, calculating gaze of a butcher assessing a prize hog. Your recovery is remarkable. My science division is eager to take samples. We must understand the source of your power. Naruto's easygoing demeanor vanished. A chill entered his blue eyes. I'm not a specimen. And you're not taking anything from me. Niji scoffed, stepping forward. Show some respect. You're speaking to the king of Germa 66. He jabbed a thumb at his own chest. You may have gotten in a few lucky shots at the party, but you don't look so tough now. You look like a stray dog we picked up off the street. Niji, Reiju warned, her voice low. It's true. Yanji chimed in, cracking his knuckles. His jaw was still slightly discolored from where Sanji had kicked him. He's all skin and bones. I bet I could snap him in half. Naruto ignored them. His focus was entirely on Judge. He recognized the look in the king's eyes. It was the same look Danzo used to have, the gaze of a man who saw people as nothing more than pieces on a board, tools to be used and discarded for a greater ambition. I have questions, Judge said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. Your shadow clone ability. Is there a limit to how many you can create? Are they solid? Do they possess independent thought? As many as I need. Yes. And yes, Naruto answered curtly. Judge's eyes gleamed. Incredible. A one-man army. And the energy transformation, the golden fox avatar. What is the destructive yield of such a technique? Can it be sustained? What are its energy requirements? It's strong enough, Naruto said, his voice flat. Look, old man, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I have no idea where I am. I'm not in the mood for 20 questions from a guy whose life I just saved. The temperature in the room dropped. Niji's smirk turned into a furious snarl. Old man. You dare speak to our father that way? You need to be taught a lesson in manners. Indeed, Judge said, a cold smile touching his lips. He looked at Naruto, then at his sons. An idea was forming, another test. Another opportunity to collect data. You possess great power, boy. But power without discipline is useless. My sons are the pinnacle of scientific enhancement and combat training. They are perfect soldiers. Niji, Yanji. Take him to Training Room 7. Assess his close-quarters combat capabilities. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Niji's grin was predatory. With pleasure, father. Yanji slammed a fist into his palm. Finally. Time to put this loudmouth in his place. Reiju stepped forward. Father, he's still recovering. This is unwise. Silence, Reiju, Judge commanded without looking at her. His recovery rate is part of the assessment. I want to see his limits. He turned his full attention back to Naruto, his eyes glinting with challenge. Unless, of course, you are afraid. Was your display at the tea party merely a fluke? Naruto met the king's condescending gaze and felt a familiar spark of defiance ignite in his chest. He was being goaded, tested, treated like an animal to be prodded. Fine. If they wanted a demonstration, he'd give them one. He let a slow, easy grin spread across his face. It was the same grin he used to give the third Hokage right before pulling a village-wide prank. Afraid? Not even a little. But if I break your toys, you can't get mad at me. Niji's eye twitched. You'll be eating those words. Lead the way, Naruto said, gesturing with a sweep of his hand. I could use a good stretch. The walk to Training Room 7 was a silent, tense affair. The corridors of the Germa kingdom were as sterile and impersonal as the med bay, all polished metal, stark lighting, and the faint hum of unseen machinery. Soldiers in masked uniforms stood at perfect attention in alcoves, their presence more like statues than living beings. They all turned their heads in unison to watch Naruto pass, their faceless masks betraying nothing. It was a kingdom without a soul. Training Room 7 was a vast, circular chamber with a high, domed ceiling. The walls and floor were made of a dark, matte gray metal that seemed to absorb the light. There were no obstacles, no equipment. It was a simple, brutal arena. Judge, Ichiji, and Reiju moved to a reinforced observation deck that overlooked the room from above, its transparent window likely made of something far stronger than glass. Naruto walked to the center of the floor, feeling the cool metal under his bare feet. Niji and Yanji stood opposite him, their arrogance rolling off them in waves. Ready to beg for mercy? Yanji taunted, activating his raid suit. Green light enveloped him, and with a series of satisfying clicks and hisses, the armored suit of winch green materialized around his body. Niji followed suit, his blue, electric blue armor clamping into place. He sparked his fingers, and arcs of brilliant blue electricity danced between them. This won't take long. Naruto just stood there in his plain gray shirt and pants, looking utterly unimpressive between the two armored super soldiers. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the satisfying pop in his joints. He was still drained, his chakra reserves at maybe a quarter of their usual capacity, and Kurama was dead to the world. But for two arrogant princes who'd never been in a real fight for their lives, it was more than enough. From the observation deck, Judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowed in intense concentration. Begin. Niji vanished. He moved with the incredible speed granted by his suit, appearing as a blue blur. He aimed to appear right behind Naruto, his hand charged with 1,000,000 volts. It was a classic speed blitz, meant to overwhelm and incapacitate in a single blow. But the spot he was aiming for was empty. Naruto hadn't moved with blinding speed. He had simply taken one calm, deliberate step to the left. Niji's electrified hand passed through the air where his head had been. The prince's eyes widened in surprise at the miss, his momentum carrying him forward. As Niji passed him, Naruto's hand shot out, not in a punch, but with an open palm. He gently tapped Niji on the back of the knee. It was a light touch, almost casual, but it struck a precise nerve cluster. Niji's leg buckled instantly, sending him stumbling. At the same time, Yanji charged, bellowing a war cry. He was a green battering ram, his fist cocked back, the mechanisms in his arm whining as he prepared to put his full strength into the punch. Naruto didn't meet the attack head-on. He pivoted on his heel, letting Yanji's massive frame rush past him. As the green-armored prince thundered by, Naruto hooked a foot around his ankle. It wasn't a kick, it was a simple, elegant trip. Yanji, for all his genetically engineered strength and technological enhancement, was still bound by the laws of physics. His own forward momentum became his enemy. With a surprised yelp, he pitched forward, crashing face-first into the recovering Niji. The two princes went down in a tangled, clattering heap of state-of-the-art armor. The entire exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. A dead silence fell over the training room. In the observation deck, Ichiji's impassive expression remained, but his gaze had sharpened. Reiju's hand went to her mouth, hiding a smile that she couldn't quite suppress. Judge's face was unreadable, his eyes burning with an intensity that was almost frightening. What was that? Yanji roared, scrambling to his feet, his faceplate flushed with fury and embarrassment. You didn't even hit me. I didn't need to, Naruto said cheerfully. You two are fast and strong, I'll give you that. But you're loud. Your movements, your breathing, the whine of your suits. I can read you like a book. Don't get cocky. Niji snarled, his pride wounded far more than his body. He shot forward again, but this time he was more cautious, moving in a wide circle, firing bolts of electricity from his fingertips. Naruto walked calmly through the volley of attacks, not even bothering to dodge. The lightning bolts sizzled and died a few inches from his skin, deflected by a barely visible shimmer of chakra. It was the most basic form of chakra control, but to the Vinsmokes, it looked like magic. Yanji attacked from the other side, extending his arm with his winch-like ability. Naruto simply sidestepped the punch, grabbed the extended arm, and used Yanji's own retraction mechanism to pull the prince towards him. He then spun, using Yanji as a human flail, and slammed him directly into Niji's path. Crash! The two brothers collided for a second time. This is pathetic, Naruto sighed, shaking his head. Is this really the best your kingdom of science can do? That was the final insult. I'll kill you. Niji shrieked, his composure completely gone. He and Yanji got up, their movements now frenzied and sloppy. They attacked together, a flurry of electrified kicks and super-strong punches. Naruto just stood his ground. He crossed his fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Poof. A single, perfect copy of himself appeared beside him. The Vinsmokes in the observation deck leaned forward, their scientific minds reeling. It wasn't an illusion. Their sensors were picking up two identical, distinct biological signatures. Niji and Yanji, seeing two targets, didn't hesitate. They each focused on one of the Narutos, unleashing their strongest attacks. Yanji threw a punch that could dent steel at the Naruto on the right. Niji delivered a lightning-fast kick at the one on the left. The Naruto on the right dissolved into a puff of smoke just before the punch connected. At the same moment, the Naruto on the left, the real one, ducked under Niji's kick. His hands moved in a blur, striking Niji and the now overextended Yanji at the base of their necks with two precise, simultaneous karate chops. There was a soft thump as both princes' eyes rolled back into their heads. They collapsed to the floor, unconscious, their advanced armor clattering loudly in the sudden, deafening silence. Naruto stood over them, dusting off his hands. He looked up at the observation deck, his cheerful grin back in place. "They're pretty tough," he said, as if he hadn't just effortlessly dismantled two of the world's most advanced living weapons. "They just need to work on their teamwork." "So, are we done here?" Judge stared down at the scene, his mind racing. The boy hadn't used any of the large-scale, destructive powers he'd displayed at the tea party. He hadn't used the spinning sphere or the chakra cloak or the giant fox avatar. He had one with basic martial arts, superior tactics, and a single, inexplicable duplication technique. The boy wasn't just a nuke. He was a master assassin, a one-man army, and a brilliant strategist all rolled into one. His value had just skyrocketed. "The assessment is complete," Judge said, his voice dangerously smooth. He turned to leave the observation deck. "Reiju. See to our guest. Show him the extent of our kingdom. It is important he understands what we are offering him." Reiju nodded, her expression carefully neutral, though her heart was hammering in her chest. She had seen her arrogant, powerful brothers defeated before, but always by overwhelming force, like Big Mom's commanders. She had never seen them so thoroughly and completely outclassed, made to look like clumsy children by skill alone. She led a hungry Naruto to the mess hall, a massive, cathedral-like space where thousands of identical soldiers in white uniforms ate in perfect, synchronized silence. The sight was deeply unsettling to Naruto, who was used to the loud, boisterous chaos of the Ichiraku ramen bar. He wolfed down a mountain of food, his appetite as monstrous as his power, while Reiju explained more about their world, the Marines, the world government, the Shichibukai. It was a complex web of powers and politics that made the elemental nation seem simple by comparison. After he had eaten his fill, she fulfilled her father's command. She gave him the tour. She showed him the engine rooms that powered the continent-sized snail ships, the advanced weapon development labs, and the tactical command center that could coordinate a global invasion. It was a marvel of science and engineering, a testament to a singular, ruthless vision. Finally, she brought him to the heart of it all. The place Sanji had called the deepest circle of his own personal hell. They stood on a gantry overlooking a vast, cylindrical chamber. Below them, suspended in glowing green liquid inside thousands of glass tubes, were bodies. They were all identical, young men, pale and placid, with nutrient tubes connected to their bodies. They floated in silent, endless rows, a forest of manufactured humanity. "This is the source of our strength," Reiju said, her voice a clinical monotone. "Our cloning facility. Each soldier is genetically engineered for absolute loyalty and peak physical condition. They are grown to full maturity in 5 years. They feel no fear, no pain, no remorse. They are the perfect army." Naruto stared at the sea of faces below, a cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He saw himself in them, a tool, created for a purpose, his identity subsumed by the will of others. He saw the Jinchuriki, weapons to be wielded by their villages. But this was worse. They weren't just containers for power. They were manufactured to be disposable. "They're people," he whispered, his voice thick with horror. "They are assets," Reiju corrected, but her voice lacked conviction. For the first time, a crack appeared in her perfect mask. Her gaze drifted over the vats, and a profound weariness, a deep-seated disgust, bled into her expression. "Grown to die for a kingdom they will never truly see. For a king's ambition." Naruto saw it clearly then, the sadness she kept locked away. She was as much a prisoner here as the men in the tanks. Her enhancements, her royalty, they were just the bars of a gilded cage. As if on cue, a scientist in a lab coat hurried onto the gantry, holding a data pad. He seemed agitated. "Princess Reiju, a moment, please. I have an urgent update for the king." "What is it, Dr. Koji?" Reiju asked, her mask of composure slipping back into place. "It's about the energy anomaly we detected, the one that coincided with his arrival," the scientist said, nodding nervously at Naruto. "The tracking station at the Chiffon archipelago. The gravitational void we logged. We thought it was a sensor ghost, but it's not. It's real. And it's not inert." He tapped his data pad, and a holographic image shimmered into existence between them. It showed a map of a sector of the New World. In one corner, a tiny point of absolute black was marked. It's faint, the doctor continued, his voice trembling slightly, but it's actively drawing in ambient energy from its surroundings. Hockey, static electricity, thermal energy, it's all being pulled into that point. Like a microscopic black hole. The rate is increasing exponentially. We've never seen anything like it. Reiju studied the hologram, her brow furrowed. The location? An unmapped island in the calm belt. Remote, uninhabited. For now. Naruto stared at the black dot on the map. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air in the cloning bay. An emptiness. A devouring silence. It felt horribly familiar. Reiju dismissed the scientist with a wave. Continue to monitor it and log the data. My father's priority remains the analysis of our guest. The scientist bowed and scurried away. Reiju turned back to Naruto, but the moment of shared vulnerability was gone, replaced by the weight of their respective duties. The tour was over. She led him to the throne room. It was a cavernous, imposing chamber, dominated by a massive, gear-shaped throne upon which Vinsmoke Judge sat, looking every bit the tyrannical king. Ichiji stood silently to his right, while the newly awakened and deeply humbled Niji and Yanji stood to his left, their glares a mixture of hatred and fear. Judge let the silence stretch, his gaze fixed on Naruto. He had the data from the spar. He had the initial reports on the chakra analysis. He had seen the boys discussed in the cloning bay. Now, it was time to make his move. You have seen the power of the Germa kingdom, Judge began, his voice echoing in the hall. The pinnacle of science and military might. A force destined to reclaim its rightful place as the rulers of the North Blue, and perhaps, beyond. He rose from his throne, descending the steps towards Naruto. And you, he continued, are the single most powerful biological entity I have ever encountered. A force of nature in the guise of a boy. Your power is untamed, your potential limitless. Wasted, on sentiment and pointless altruism. He stopped directly in front of Naruto. I am a pragmatist. I see an opportunity for a mutually beneficial alliance. Your power, combined with our technology, our strategy, our army, we would be unstoppable. The world government, the other emperors, they would all fall before us. A new world order would be forged, one of logic, strength, and perfect order. He placed a heavy hand on Naruto's shoulder. It wasn't a friendly gesture, it was a claim of ownership. Join us, Naruto Uzumaki. I will give you anything you desire. Wealth. Status. Power. I will make you a prince of Germa. A member of my royal family. His eyes flickered towards Reiju, who stood watching, her face a perfect, unreadable mask. An alliance, sealed by blood and bond. You will have a home here. A purpose. Naruto listened, his expression uncharacteristically serious. He thought about the soulless soldiers. He thought about the arrogant princes who only understood strength. He thought about the calculating king who saw his own children as tools. And he thought about Reiju, the only one among them with a flicker of a human heart, trapped in a cage of her father's making. A home. A purpose. This wasn't a home. It was a factory. And their purpose was nothing but a madman's dream of conquest. It was the antithesis of everything he had ever fought for. He looked from Judge's cold, calculating eyes to Reiju's guarded violet ones. He saw her standing there, a beautiful, perfect product of this loveless kingdom, and a great, profound sadness washed over him. Then he looked back at the king, and his blue eyes were as hard as ice. He shrugged Judge's hand off his shoulder. I don't work for anyone, Naruto said, his voice quiet but ringing with absolute finality in the cavernous hall. He took a step back, putting a definitive space between them. And I don't see a family here. He let his gaze sweep over the Vinsmoke siblings, lingering for a fraction of a second on Reiju, before finally landing back on the stunned face of the king. I see a king and his tools. The words hung in the air, a stunning, brutal denunciation of everything Vinsmoke Judge had built his life upon. Neji and Yanji bristled with rage. Ichiji's eyebrow twitched, a tidal wave of emotion for him. Reiju's breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment, a look of pure, unadulterated shock broke through her perfect facade. The gauntlet had been thrown. The battle for the soul of Germa had just begun. Chapter 3, The Poison and the Cure. The silence in the throne room was a weapon in itself, cold and sharp. Judge's face, which had been alight with the promise of ultimate power, slowly hardened into a mask of granite. The audacity of the boy was staggering. To be offered a place at the pinnacle of the world and to throw it back in his face with such contempt, it was an insult of the highest order. Niji's hand went to his belt, his knuckles white. "Father, give the word. I'll fry him where he stands." "He is not worth the energy, Neji," Ichiji said, his voice a low, chilling monotone. His crimson gaze was fixed on Naruto, not with anger, but with a cold, detached curiosity. It was the look of a scientist observing a specimen that had unexpectedly bitten back. Judge raised a hand, silencing his sons. He was a king, a strategist. Outright rage was a tool for lesser men. He had been challenged, his entire philosophy dismissed. This required a different approach. If the boy would not be a willing weapon, he would be a coerced one. He needed to be shown the logic of their world. "Your sentimentality is a weakness, Naruto Uzumaki," Judge said, his voice dangerously soft. "A fatal flaw. But it can also be useful." He turned his gaze to Reiju, who had schooled her features back into a mask of neutrality. "You saved my daughter's life. You saved all of our lives. The debt remains. Whether you accept my offer or not, you are our guest. And you will find that the Germa kingdom is not a pleasant place for those who do not contribute." The implicit threat was clear. Naruto was a guest, but also a prisoner. "Fine by me," Naruto said with a shrug, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to the tension suffocating the room. "Your beds are lumpy anyway." He turned to leave, but Judge's voice stopped him. "There is the matter of our benefactor." He spat the word as if it were poison. "Big Mom will not let the humiliation stand. Her fleet will harry us, test our defenses, probe for weakness. One of her flotillas, led by her 14th daughter, Charlotte Smoothie, has been disrupting a vital supply route near the risky Red Archipelago. They have blockaded our convoys, preventing critical resources from reaching us." Naruto glanced back, a brow raised. "Sounds like a you problem." "It is a we problem," Judge corrected, his eyes glinting. "As long as you reside on my ship, their target is your target. You have proven yourself capable of handling her commanders. I am requesting your assistance in this matter. Consider it a way to earn your keep." He smiled, a thin, predatory thing. "Reiju will accompany you. She will command the support fleet and provide tactical oversight. It will be an excellent opportunity for you to see the efficiency of Germa in a true combat scenario." It was a test, and everyone knew it. A test of Naruto's loyalty, a test of his power in a controlled engagement, and a way to bind him closer to them through shared conflict. It was also a leash. Reiju was not just his support, she was his handler. Naruto looked at Reiju. She met his gaze, her violet eyes unreadable. There was no plea for help, no hint of defiance against her father. Just a quiet, resigned acceptance of her role. He saw again the prisoner in the gilded cage. If he refused, what would happen to her? Would she be sent alone? Would she be punished for his defiance? He didn't know, but the thought of leaving her to her father's machinations left a sour taste in his mouth. "Fine," Naruto said, the single word sealing his fate. "But we do this my way. No casualties if we can help it." Yanji snorted. "It's war, you idiot. People are supposed to die." Naruto just gave him a look that promised a repeat of their spar if he kept talking. Yanji wisely fell silent. The mission briefing was short and brutally efficient. 2 hours later, Naruto stood on the deck of the Denjiki Blue, one of Germa's faster, sleeker assault ships. It was Niji's personal vessel, though the prince himself was conspicuously absent, likely sulking in his quarters. The ship, along with 4 others, detached from the main body of the Snail Kingdom, their engines humming as they cut through the waves of the New World. Reiju stood beside him at the prow, her pink raid suit active but her helmet retracted. The wind whipped her hair back, and her eyes were fixed on the horizon, her mind clearly already on the battlefield. She was all business, a perfect commander. The enemy fleet consists of 3 tart ships and Smoothie's flagship, the cutter, she said, her voice crisp and professional. Our objective is to break their blockade and destroy their primary combat strength. Smoothie is the priority target. Taking her out of the fight will shatter their morale. Right. Lure out the big boss, take her down, and the grunts will scatter, Naruto summarized, leaning against the railing. He watched the strange, candy-colored fish leap from the water. This world was bizarre. What's her deal, anyway? The tall lady with the sword. Charlotte Smoothie, Reiju recited, as if reading from a file. One of Big Mom's 3 sweet commanders. She possesses the power of the Shirbwa no Mi, a paramecia-type devil fruit. It allows her to wring the liquid out of any object, living or not. She can dehydrate her victims into desiccated husks or absorb the liquid herself to increase her own size and power. She is formidable in close combat and should not be underestimated. Naruto nodded slowly. So, don't let her grab me. Got it. He looked at Reiju. And you? What's your suit do, besides look cool? The question was so direct, so lacking in the deference she was used to, that it took her a moment to answer. My designation is Poison Pink, she said. My body is enhanced to be immune to all poisons. Furthermore, I can ingest and secrete a variety of potent toxins. My suit enhances my physical abilities and allows me to weaponize those toxins more effectively. Poison, huh? Naruto mused. Must have made you real popular at parties. The corner of her mouth twitched. That was the second time he'd almost made her smile. You have no idea. Their fleet arrived at the risky red archipelago as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and red. The islands were jagged spires of crimson rock that jutted from a turbulent sea, earning them their name. And there, positioned perfectly between the 3 largest islands, was the Big Mom Pirates flotilla. Their Jolly Roger, a grinning skull with a plumed hat, was a brazen challenge. They're expecting us, Reiju stated, her eyes narrowed. Sensors are picking up movement on the main island. They've laid a trap. Traps are my specialty, Naruto said with a grin. He crossed his fingers. In a series of 50 smokeless puffs, a small army of his clones appeared on the deck, all wearing his same determined expression. The Germa soldiers on board stared in slack-jawed astonishment. Reiju blinked, her mind once again struggling to process the sheer tactical impossibility of what she was seeing. Remarkable. All right, here's the plan, Naruto said to his clones, who all listened with rapt attention. Group A, you're on distraction. Hit them from the north. Make a lot of noise, look dangerous, but don't get into a real fight. Just keep them busy. Group B, you're on civilian duty. There's a small port on the eastern island, pirates probably took it over. Get in there, get everyone out. No one gets left behind. The rest of you, with me. We're going straight down the middle. The clones all shouted, got it, in unison and then blurred into motion. Some leaped from the ship, running across the surface of the water with practiced ease, another feat that made the Germa soldiers' eyes bulge. Others simply vanished in bursts of speed. Reiju watched him give orders to himself, a seamless, one-man command structure. It was chaotic, illogical, and yet, somehow, perfectly coordinated. And my role in this plan? She asked, a hint of wryness in her tone. You're the boss, right? Naruto said, giving her a thumbs up. You stick with me. We're gonna go say hi to the tall lady. Before she could protest, he grabbed her by the waist. Hold on. Wait, what are you? Her question was lost in a rush of wind as he leaped from the deck of the ship. He landed on the water's surface with a light splash, then took off, his feet kicking up spray as he ran towards the enemy fleet at an impossible speed, carrying her with him. Her arms instinctively wrapped around his neck, a startled yelp escaping her lips. The sensation was breathtaking, the wind, the speed, the sheer, raw power of the man holding her. It was like riding a bolt of lightning. Just as Naruto had predicted, his clone's assault from the north drew the attention of the two Tart ships. Cannon fire erupted, but the clones were too fast, too numerous, zipping across the water and up the sides of the ships, creating chaos. This left the path to Smoothie's flagship, the cutter, wide open. Naruto and Reiju arrived on its deck in a blur of motion, landing silently amidst a group of startled pirates. Well, a deep, feminine voice drawled from the quarterdeck. Look what the sea cat dragged in. The Germa princess. And, Smoothie's eyes narrowed on Naruto. The little blonde gnat from the tea party. She stood to her full, imposing height, her impossibly long legs giving her a giraffe-like elegance. She held a massive, ornate sword over her shoulder, and her expression was one of bored amusement. Mama is very angry with you. She said I should wring you dry and send you back to her in a bottle. I think I'll enjoy this. You'll have to catch me first, Naruto said, gently setting Reiju down. He turned to her and whispered, get ready to move. Smoothie laughed, a throaty, confident sound. You think you're fast? She vanished, appearing directly in front of Naruto, her speed rivaling Germa's own enhancements. Her hand, massive and strong, shot out to grab his head. But Naruto was faster. He ducked under her grasp, a spinning kick aimed at her knee. Smoothie, surprised by his speed, twisted her leg, letting the kick glance off her armored boot. The force was still enough to make her grunt in surprise. Reiju, now! Naruto yelled. Reiju didn't hesitate. She ignited the jets on her boots, blasting into the air. While Smoothie was focused on Naruto, Reiju unleashed her power. She swooped down, her hand glowing with a faint purple aura. Poison pink, corrosive kiss. She blew a stream of shimmering purple gas towards a group of pirates who were raising their rifles. The gas enveloped them, and they screamed, not in pain, but in shock, as their weapons began to hiss and dissolve in their hands, melting into slag. The gas was a potent acid, designed to destroy equipment. It was a beautiful, deadly dance. Naruto was the spearhead, his blinding speed and unpredictable movements keeping Smoothie completely occupied. He never stayed still, a whirlwind of feints, dodges, and quick, probing strikes. He wasn't trying to defeat her, he was containing her, forcing her into a purely defensive battle. Reiju, meanwhile, was the artist of chaos. She flew around the ship, a pink specter of death. She used her poison with surgical precision. A touch here to paralyze a cannon crew, a spray of neurotoxin there to send a squad of swordsmen into spasms. She never killed unless she had to, her movements efficient and almost merciful in their lethality. She was disabling the ship and its crew, piece by piece. Naruto deflected a massive sword swing from Smoothie, the force of it sending shudders up his arm. The woman was a monster of pure physical strength. He was buying time, but he couldn't keep this up forever. His reserves were still low. One of the lesser pirates, a fish man with a desperate look in his eyes, saw an opening. While Naruto was locked in a struggle with Smoothie, he lunged at Reiju from behind, a jagged sea stone dagger in his hand. For Mama! Reiju, look out! Naruto yelled, but he was too far away, his hands full. Reiju spun, her eyes widening as she saw the weapon. Sea stone. Karasaki. The one substance in this world that could nullify devil fruit powers. But she wasn't a devil fruit user. However, her father, in his infinite paranoia, had woven microscopic filaments of it into their genetic structure. It was a failsafe, a way to deactivate them if they ever went rogue. Contact with a high concentration of it would short-circuit her enhancements, leaving her as weak as a normal human. She tried to dodge, but the fishman was too close. The blade didn't cut deep, but it slashed across her thigh, a long, ugly gash in her raid suit. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of debilitating weakness washed over her. The power from her suit vanished. Her enhanced strength, her speed, her poison immunity, all gone. A gasp of pain escaped her lips, and her flight system sputtered. She fell from the air, crashing hard onto the deck. The gash in her leg was bleeding freely, the wound burning with a cold fire as the sea stone's energy interfered with her biology. "Princess," the Germa soldier shouted from a nearby ship. Smoothie saw her opportunity. A cruel grin spread across her face. "There you are." She disengaged from Naruto, turning her full attention to the fallen Reiju. "Let's see how much juice a princess has." She strode towards Reiju, her sword held ready. Naruto's eyes went wide with fury. "Get away from her." He moved, but two of Smoothie's subordinates, both massive brutes, threw themselves in his path. He dispatched them with a single, brutal kick, but it cost him a precious second. Smoothie loomed over Reiju, who was struggling to get up, her leg refusing to obey her. The world was spinning. She felt fragile. Human. "It's over, little bird," Smoothie purred, raising her hand to grab her. Suddenly, a golden blur shot past her. Naruto appeared between her and Reiju, his back to the commander, his body shielding the injured princess. He wasn't looking at Smoothie. He was kneeling, his concerned blue eyes fixed on Reiju. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with a genuine worry that cut through her pain-filled haze. "My leg, sea stone," she managed to gasp. Naruto didn't need any more explanation. He placed a hand over the wound on her thigh. A warm, green light emanated from his palm, soft and gentle. It was the complete opposite of the violent, golden energy he used in combat. This was calm, restorative. Reiju flinched, not from pain, but from the intimacy of the touch. No one had ever touched her with such gentle concern. Her father's touch was a king's claim. Her brother's was violent. Sanji's was affectionate but distant, separated by years and trauma. This was different. This was the touch of a healer. The burning sensation from the sea stone faded, neutralized by his chakra. The flesh began to knit itself back together under his hand, the wound closing with a speed her own regeneration couldn't match while weakened. Smoothie stared at the scene, momentarily baffled. "A healing power, too? Who the hell are you?" Naruto didn't answer. He finished healing the major damage, then looked up at Reiju, his face inches from hers. "Can you stand?" She nodded, still dazed by the warmth spreading through her leg. He helped her to her feet, keeping a supportive arm around her waist. She leaned against him, feeling the steady strength in his body. For the first time, she was the one being protected. It was a strange, unsettling, and not entirely unpleasant feeling. They were on a remote part of the island now, having retreated from the ship under the cover of a massive smoke bomb one of Naruto's clones had deployed. The sounds of battle were distant. Naruto had set Reiju down gently, her back against a smooth, red rock. The sun had set, and a pair of oversized moons cast a silvery glow over the landscape. "The sea stone energy is gone, but your own power will take some time to come back online," Naruto said, examining the now sealed wound on her leg. "You need to rest." "We don't have time to rest," she argued, her commander persona trying to reassert itself. "Smoothie is still out there. The mission is not complete." "The mission is on hold," he said firmly, sitting down beside her. He rummaged in his pocket and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped ration bar he'd swiped from the mess hall. Here. Eat. You lost a lot of blood. She looked at the ration bar, then at him. He had faced down a Yonko commander, healed her life-threatening wound, and now he was offering her a snack as if they were on a picnic. The sheer absurdity of it all, the complete break from the cold, ruthless logic of her world, was overwhelming. A sound escaped her, a choked sob that was half laugh, half cry. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Naruto was instantly at her side, his brow furrowed with concern. Hey, what's wrong? Does it still hurt? Did I do something wrong? She shook her head, lowering her hands. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks, washing away the perfect mask. No. You didn't do anything wrong. That's the problem. Her voice was raw, vulnerable, stripped of all its aristocratic poise. You're impossible. You fight for people you don't know. You heal your enemies' allies. You smile after you've nearly been killed. It doesn't make any sense. Naruto listened, his expression softening. He remembered another proud, lonely person who had once said similar things to him. Why do you keep interfering? My whole life, Reiju continued, her voice barely a whisper, has been about strength. About logic. Emotion is a flaw. Kindness is a liability. My father modified us, turned us into weapons, all to reclaim an old glory. He took away my brother's ability to feel, to care. He tried to take mine, too. She looked at her hands, which were trembling slightly. But my mother, she fought back. She took a drug during her pregnancy, trying to reverse the effects, to save us. To make sure we could still be human. It killed her. And it only worked on one of us. She looked up at him, her violet eyes swimming with a sorrow so deep it seemed to have no bottom. It only worked on Sanji. Then she corrected herself, a bitter, self-deprecating smile on her lips. No, that's not entirely true. The drug had a partial effect on me. It didn't save my humanity completely. It just gave me the ability to feel empathy, while leaving me powerless to act on it. I can feel everyone's pain, but I am still my father's loyal soldier. A weapon that understands the suffering it causes. It's a curse. Naruto looked at her, and for the first time, he saw not Poison Pink, the commander, or Princess Reiju, the political asset. He saw a woman in profound, silent agony, trapped between her programming and her soul. He remembered his own curse. The whispers, the glares, the loneliness of being the Kyubi Jinchuriki. A weapon for the Leaf Village. He understood. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He just reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Your mother didn't fail, he said, his voice soft but firm. She saved you. That empathy, it's not a curse. It's who you are. It's your strength. Your father just taught you to see it as a weakness. He gave her a small, sad smile. I know a thing or two about being seen as a weapon. And I know that it's not what you are that matters. It's what you do with it. She stared at him, at the absolute sincerity in his blue eyes. He wasn't pitying her. He was seeing her. Truly seeing her. The moment was broken by a frantic voice in her earpiece, which had just come back online. Princess Reiju. Come in. The clones, they've succeeded. They secured the port and evacuated all the civilians. They're on their way to the rendezvous point. Reiju blinked, snapping back to the present. The civilians. In the chaos of the fight, she'd forgotten about them. But he hadn't. It was part of his primary plan. Not an afterthought, but a priority. She looked at Naruto, a new, dawning respect in her eyes. This wasn't just a boy with monstrous power. He was a leader. A better one than her father could ever be. Their victory was decisive. With the civilians clear and Reiju's command authority re-established via radio, the Germa fleet launched a coordinated bombardment that crippled the two Tart ships. Smoothie, finding her crew disabled and her support ships burning, was forced into a humiliating retreat. She cast one last, furious glare at the island where Naruto and Reiju were before vanishing into the night. They returned to the kingdom of Germa not just as victors, but as something different. Something had shifted between them on that red rock island. They stood in a sterile corridor outside the throne room, the mission report delivered. Judge was, for once, pleased. The result was all that mattered to him. You fought well, Reiju said, her voice back to its usual composed tone, but her eyes held a new warmth. Thank you, Naruto. For everything. Hey, we're a team, right? He said with an easy grin. You poison M, I punch M. And sometimes, you get hurt, and I patch you up. That's how it works. Before she could respond, the throne room doors hissed open. Judge stood there, his face an unreadable mask of triumph. He had seen the mission logs. He had seen their coordinated success. He had seen Naruto's power used in service of a Germa objective. His plan was working, just not in the way he had originally intended. The boy wouldn't be a loyal soldier. But perhaps he could be bound by other means. A stunning success, Judge declared, his voice booming. You have proven the synergy between Germa's science and our new asset. This alliance is more promising than I could have imagined. He stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over both of them. An alliance of this magnitude cannot be left to chance. It must be solidified. Formalized. Made unbreakable in the eyes of the world. He raised his hands in a grand, theatrical gesture. Therefore, to secure our future and bind our strengths, I, Vinsmoke Judge, King of the Germa Kingdom, do hereby announce the formal engagement of my daughter, Princess Reiju, to our new champion, Naruto Uzumaki. The declaration echoed in the hall, a pronouncement that was not a question, but a royal decree. Naruto's grin vanished, replaced by a look of pure, dumbfounded shock. The hell did you just say? Reiju froze, her blood running cold. Her father hadn't changed his strategy. He had refined it. He couldn't control Naruto with force, so he would control him with her. This wasn't an engagement. It was a gilded chain, and her father had just locked it around both of their necks. Naruto's shock morphed into a cold fury. His eyes blazed. You don't get to decide that, he snarled at Judge, taking a step forward, his fists clenching. But before he could act, Reiju's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. Her touch was firm, desperate. He looked at her, and in her eyes, he saw not fear, but a plea for patience. A silent message. Wait, she whispered, her voice so low only he could hear it. Her grip was iron. This is a cage. But for now, she looked from her father's triumphant face back to his, we're on the same side of the bars. Her words stopped him cold. She wasn't accepting this. She was reframing it. It was a trap, yes. But it was a trap they were both in, together. And from the inside, perhaps, they could find a way to break it. Chapter 4, Whispers from the Void. The announcement of their engagement echoed through the metallic halls of the Germa kingdom like a declaration of war. To the rank-and-file soldiers, it was a logical, strategic masterstroke, the union of Germa's heir and their newfound god of destruction. To Naruto, it was a cage. To Reiju, it was a chess move, and she was the piece. Being sacrificed. For 3 days, a tense, unspoken truce held. Naruto avoided Judge like the plague, spending most of his time either eating the royal kitchen bear or attempting to meditate, trying to reach the slumbering consciousness of Kurama with no success. He was a ball of caged energy, furious at the political maneuvering but held in check by Reiju's whispered plea. Wait. Reiju, for her part, threw herself into her duties. She oversaw the analysis of the battle data, the repairs to the fleet, and the integration of the resources they'd liberated. She moved with a chilling efficiency, her mask of command firmly in place. But whenever she and Naruto passed in a corridor, their eyes would meet, and an unspoken understanding would pass between them, a shared frustration, a common enemy. The engagement was a fiction, a tool of her father's, but the alliance it had created between them felt increasingly real. The fragile peace shattered on the fourth day. They were in the primary command center, a vast, circular room dominated by a holographic map of the New World. Judge was outlining a new series of strategic patrols, his voice droning on about buffer zones and territorial claims. Ichiji stood beside him, impassive as ever. Niji and Yanji were present as well, their resentment toward Naruto a palpable force in the room, though they kept their mouths shut. Naruto was there by royal decree, leaning against a bulkhead with his arms crossed, looking profoundly bored. Reiju stood at the opposite side of the table, her gaze fixed on the map, her mind a million miles away. Suddenly, a panicked voice cut through the comms. "Your Majesty! Urgent report from the Science Division." "This had better be important," Dr. Koji, Judge said, his voice laced with annoyance at the interruption. "It is, sir. It's the anomaly." Koji's voice was strained, high-pitched with a fear that was anything but scientific. "The energy void in the calm belt. We sent a deep-range reconnaissance vessel, the Pathfinder, to deploy a long-term sensor probe. We wanted to get a closer reading." Judge's eyes narrowed. "And? We lost contact with them an hour ago," the doctor stammered. One moment they were transmitting telemetry, the next, nothing. Just silence. No distress call, no system failure warnings. They just vanished. A chill swept through the room. A state-of-the-art Germa science vessel didn't just disappear. What was their last known position? Reiju asked, her voice sharp and focused. A set of coordinates flashed on the main holographic map, pinpointing a location in a notoriously treacherous stretch of sea known for its lack of wind and abundance of massive sea kings. But the location itself wasn't the most alarming part. It was the icon marking it, a small, pulsating black dot. The void Naruto had seen on the hologram in the cloning bay. "The anomaly," Naruto said, his voice low. He pushed himself off the wall, his casual posture gone. He felt that same cold dread from before, a primal sense of wrongness that made the hairs on his arms stand up. "It's likely a unique magnetic field interfering with communications, or a Sea King attack," Ichiji stated, ever the pragmatist. "The calm belt is unpredictable. The Pathfinder is equipped to handle a dozen Sea Kings, and its communications array is hardened against solar flares and magnetic interference," Reiju countered, her eyes glued to the map. "This is not a standard equipment failure." Judge was silent for a moment, his gloved fingers drumming on the table. A lost ship was an acceptable loss. But an unexplained phenomenon that could make one of his best ships vanish without a trace. That was a threat. An unknown variable. And Judge hated unknown variables. "I want answers," he commanded. "Ichiji. Niji. Take a squadron. Go to those coordinates and retrieve the Pathfinder's black box. Find out what happened." "Father," Reiju interjected, stepping forward. "Ichiji and Niji are combat specialists. I have a background in exobiology and theoretical physics. My team designed the Pathfinder's sensor suite. I am better equipped to analyze whatever we might find there." Judge considered this. She was right. But it was a potentially hostile, unknown environment. "I'll go with her," Naruto said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. His expression was grim. "That black dot. I've got a bad feeling about it. A really bad feeling." Niji scoffed. "What, your gut tells you it's spooky? We don't operate on feelings here, Stray." "My feelings kept your head from being taken off by a Yonko commander a few days ago," Naruto shot back without heat. "I'm going. With Reiju." It wasn't a request. The tone in his voice made it clear he would go whether they sanctioned it or not. Judge looked from Naruto's unwavering determination to his daughter's cool resolve, then to his other two sons. A calculated risk. Sending his most valuable assets into an unknown situation was dangerous. But sending them together, it was the perfect test of their synergy. And if this void was a new form of power, he wanted his greatest weapon to be the first to encounter it. Very well, Judge acquiesced. Reiju, you will lead the mission. Ichiji, Niji, you will accompany them. Your objective is reconnaissance and retrieval only. Do not engage any unknown forces without my direct authorization. He looked pointedly at Naruto. Am I clear? Naruto just grunted in response. The mission was set. The journey to the calm belt was unnervingly quiet. They took a single, high-speed stealth vessel, the Silent Shadow, designed for infiltration. The usual hum of the wind and crash of the waves died away as they entered the windless stretch of ocean. The sea became a flat, glassy mirror under a gray, overcast sky. The only sounds were the thrum of their ship's engines and the occasional, distant roar of some titanic beast moving in the deep. Naruto stood at the prow, his senses on high alert. The closer they got to the coordinates, the more that feeling of wrongness grew. It was a pressure in the air, a silence that felt heavier than it should. It was like the world was holding its breath. Reiju stood beside him, her faceplate retracted. She was monitoring a handheld sensor, its readings growing more and more erratic. The ambient energy levels are dropping precipitously, she murmured, more to herself than to him. It's not just electromagnetic energy. My sensors are picking up a drain on what you would call natural energy. It's being consumed. Devoured, Naruto corrected, his eyes scanning the horizon. That's what it feels like. Ichiji and Niji stood behind them, their arms crossed, their impatience and skepticism radiating off them. There's nothing here, Niji complained. Just a creepy bit of ocean. The crew probably got eaten by a sea king and the ship sank. As if on cue, the ship's lookout called down from the crow's nest, his voice tight with shock. Island, dead ahead. Anne. Mother of snails, what is that? They all looked. An island rose from the flat sea, but it was unlike any they had ever seen. It wasn't green with life or the red of the archipelago. It was gray. A uniform, dusty, lifeless gray. The trees were gaunt, skeletal things, their branches brittle and bare. The ground was covered in a fine, ash-like dust. There were no birds, no insects, no signs of life whatsoever. And beached on the gray shore, listing to one side like the carcass of a metal whale, was the Pathfinder. It was intact, but its hull was tarnished, the proud Germa insignia faded and peeling. It looked ancient, as if it had been sitting there for 100 years instead of a few hours. The Silent Shadow dropped anchor 100 yards from the shore. A profound silence emanated from the island, a dead quiet that was more terrifying than any roar. All right, Ichiji said, taking command. Niji, you're with me. We'll secure the Pathfinder and retrieve the logs. Reiju, you and him will provide overwatch. Negative, Naruto said, his eyes not leaving the island. We're all going. We stick together. Splitting up here is a stupid idea. I don't take orders from you, Ichiji retorted coldly. Then consider it a strong suggestion from the guy who can feel this entire island screaming in silent agony, Naruto said, his voice dropping. There's something here. Something that ate all the life. I'm not letting anyone go in alone. Reiju put a hand on Ichiji's arm. He's right. My sensors are going haywire. We don't know the nature of the threat. A 4-person cell is tactically superior. Ichiji hesitated, then gave a curt nod. He hated to admit it, but the logic was sound. They activated their raid suits, the familiar colors of red, blue, and pink, a defiant splash against the monochrome landscape. Naruto just cracked his knuckles, a faint golden shimmer of chakra briefly enveloping him before vanishing. They leaped from the ship, landing softly on the gray, dusty shore. The dust puffed up around their boots. Naruto knelt, touching it with his fingertips. It wasn't sand or soil. It was fine, crumbly, and utterly devoid of moisture or nutrients. It's desiccated organic matter, Reiju said, her own sensors confirming his observation. The remains of every plant, every insect, every microbe on this island. All of it, reduced to this, dust. They approached the Pathfinder, their boots crunching on the eerie gray ground. The ship's entry ramp was down, a dark, gaping maw. The air grew colder as they neared it, an unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Hello." Neji called out, his voice sounding small and thin in the oppressive silence. "Anyone aboard?" Only the dead quiet answered. Ichiji went in first, his blaster drawn. Neji followed, electricity crackling around his gauntlets. Naruto and Reiju entered last. The inside of the ship was as silent and still as the outside. Emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows down the metallic corridors. Everything was covered in the same fine gray dust. They found the crew in the mess hall. They were sitting at the tables, some with forks halfway to their mouths, others leaning back in their chairs. They weren't wounded. There were no signs of a struggle. They were simply, gray. Their skin was the color of ash, their eyes were dull, open, and vacant. They were like statues, frozen in the last moments of their lives. What happened to them? Neji whispered, his arrogance finally cracking to reveal a sliver of fear. Reiju knelt by one of the bodies, her gloved hand hovering over its face. Their life force, it's gone. All of it. Not just the electrical energy of their nervous systems. The very biological essence of them has been siphoned away. Naruto felt a wave of nausea. He had seen death. He had seen war. But this was different. This was an erasure. A complete and utter consumption. They made their way to the bridge. The scene was the same. The command crew was frozen at their stations. The ship's black box was intact. Reiju quickly interfaced with it, her fingers flying across a holographic keypad. "I'm downloading the logs," she said. Final sensor readings, visual and audio recordings. Her voice trailed off as she saw the final few seconds of the recording. Her eyes widened in horror. "My God! What is it?" Ichiji demanded. Before she could answer, a new sound broke the silence. It was faint at first, a low, soft hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ship's metal frame began to vibrate in sympathy with it. Naruto's head snapped up. "It's here." The hum grew louder, resonating in their bones, in their teeth. And with it came a feeling of immense pressure, as if the very air was turning to lead. Naruto felt his own chakra, the familiar warmth inside him, begin to flicker and dim, as if a great weight was pressing down on it. "My suit," Neji grunted, looking down at his gauntlets. "The power levels are dropping." "The energy field is intensifying," Reiju said, her eyes darting around. "It's suppressing our technology. And it's suppressing biological energy, too." The lights in the corridor flickered and died, plunging them into near-total darkness, relieved only by the faint glow of their raid suits. Then, at the far end of the corridor, a figure coalesced out of the shadows. It was humanoid in shape but indistinct, its form seeming to shimmer and waver like a heat haze. It had no discernible features, no face, no eyes, no mouth. It was a silhouette carved out of the darkness, a walking void. Its presence was the source of the pressure, the cold, the silence. This was the thing that had consumed the island. This was the Silent One. "Identify yourself," Ichiji commanded, raising his blaster. The creature didn't respond. It simply drifted towards them, its movements slow, deliberate, and utterly soundless. "I don't think it wants to talk," Naruto said grimly. He stepped in front of the others, his fists raised. He tried to mold his chakra, to form a Rasengan, but it was like trying to shape water with his bare hands. The energy was sluggish, suppressed, difficult to control. The null field this thing was projecting was potent. "Forget it, I'll handle this," Neji yelled, desperate to prove his worth. He lunged forward, his fist crackling with what little electricity he could still generate. Henry Blazer. He threw a punch that should have carried 1,000,000 volts. It connected with the creature's chest. But there was no explosion, no arc of electricity. The energy simply vanished. It was absorbed into the creature's form without a trace. The Silent One didn't even flinch. It raised a featureless hand and touched Neji's chest. Neji screamed. It was not a scream of pain, but of pure terror. The blue light of his raid suit flickered violently and then went out. The powered armor locked up, becoming a dead weight. He was thrown backwards, crashing to the floor, his face pale with shock. "It drains energy on contact," Reiju yelled. "All forms of energy." Ichiji, seeing his brother fall, didn't hesitate. He fired his blaster, a concentrated beam of crimson light. Sparking Valkyrie. The beam hit the creature dead center. For a moment it was illuminated, its form wavering violently. But then, like Neji's lightning, the energy beam was simply drawn into it, consumed in an instant. The Silent One turned its head towards Ichiji. Naruto knew he had to act. Conventional ninjutsu was too slow, too weak in this field. Haki and raid suits were useless. That left one thing. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and drew on the natural energy of the world around him. It was faint here, thin and dying, but it wasn't gone completely. He pulled it into himself, feeling the familiar markings of Sage Mode appear around his eyes. It was a struggle. The null field fought him every step of the way, but Sage Mode was different. It wasn't just his own energy. It was the energy of the world itself. He opened his eyes, his pupils now horizontal slits. The world looked different, clearer. He could see the life force, what little was left, of his companions. He could also see the creature for what it was, a black hole of life energy. A terrifying, absolute void. The Silent One was now moving towards Ichiji. Naruto moved faster. He appeared in front of his reluctant ally in a flicker of sage-enhanced speed. The creature's hand was inches from Ichiji's face. Naruto met it not with a jutsu, but with a simple, brutal punch. His fist was coated in a transparent, barely visible aura of natural energy. Bam! The impact was shockingly solid. For the first time, the creature was physically stopped. A ripple, like a stone dropped in black water, emanated from the point of impact. The creature was actually thrown back a step, its form flickering violently. It had been hurt. The creature paused. It seemed to look at Naruto, its focus shifting entirely onto him. This was a new variable. This was a power it had not encountered before. A power that could resist its drain. It raised both its hands, and the pressure in the corridor intensified tenfold. Naruto felt the sage energy he had gathered being actively pulled from him, the drain now a physical, painful sensation. "It's adapting," he grunted, gritting his teeth. Then, the creature spoke. Its voice was not a sound that came from a mouth, but a thought that was brutally inserted directly into their minds. It was a chorus of 1,000 dying whispers, cold and emotionless. "The lights will be consumed." The Vinsmoke siblings recoiled, clutching their heads as the alien thought violated their consciousness. "The source is a beacon." The maelstrom opened the way. Naruto's blood ran cold. Maelstrom. Uzumaki. It was talking about him. His arrival had led it here. The hunger is eternal. The silence is inevitable. With that final, chilling pronouncement, the creature's form began to dissolve, not into smoke, but into the very shadows of the corridor. It simply faded from existence, the oppressive pressure vanishing with it. They were left in the dark, silent corridor, the echoes of that terrifying mental voice still ringing in their minds. Neji was struggling to get his suit to reboot. Ichiji was silent, his usual composure completely shattered. Reiju was looking at Naruto, her face a mixture of terror and awe. "What was that thing?" she breathed. "I don't know," Naruto said, his sage mode fading as he couldn't sustain it against the residual drain. "But it knows who I am. And I think it followed me here." The mission was a failure and a horrifying success. They had not retrieved the Pathfinder, but they had found something far more important, a threat that operated on a level they couldn't comprehend. A threat beyond pirates, beyond marines, beyond anything this world was prepared for. They escaped the island, the image of the gray, dead landscape and the silent, frozen crew burned into their minds. They had a recording of the creature. They had its final, terrifying words. Back on the kingdom of Germa, in the throne room, they played the recording for Judge. The king watched the entire encounter in silence, his face a mask of stone. He saw his son's powers fail. He saw his technology rendered useless. He saw Naruto, the boy he thought he could control, be the only one to land a blow. When the recording ended with the creature's final, chilling message, Judge was silent for a full minute. He looked at Naruto, his eyes holding a new, complex emotion. It wasn't just ambition anymore. It was a sliver of something that looked almost like fear. "This void sovereign it serves," Judge said, his voice low. "This entity that consumes life. It is not a worldly threat. It is a cosmic one." He looked at the four of them, his three children, beaten and shaken, and the outsider who had become their only effective defense. His entire worldview, built on the supremacy of science and technology, had just been proven insufficient. Naruto felt the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. He was adrift in a new world, and he had accidentally led a dimension-hopping plague to its doorstep. His past had finally caught up with him, in the worst way imaginable. Reiju came to stand beside him, her usual composure returned but her eyes holding the shadow of what she'd seen. She looked from her father to Naruto, and a new resolve settled on her face. Their petty squabbles, their political games, the forced engagement, it all seemed so insignificant now. "We have a new enemy," she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing with an authority that surprised everyone, including her father. "And it's a threat to everyone, not just Germa." She looked at Naruto, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They were no longer just captives in a political game. They were soldiers in a new, terrifying, and unspoken war. The fight for the soul of Germa had just been dwarfed by a fight for the survival of the world. Chapter 5, The Red Dogs Leash. The news of Germa's survival and subsequent victory against a sweet commander did not just ripple through the underworld, it hit the world government with the force of a tidal wave. For years, the Germa kingdom had been a manageable problem, a rogue nation with advanced technology, but one that kept to the shadows, a tool to be occasionally used or suppressed. But the events at the Whole Cake Island Tea Party had changed the equation entirely. They had allied themselves with an unknown power. An entity that could wound a Yonko, dismantle her command structure, and vanish without a trace. This was not just a shift in power, it was the introduction of a chaotic, unpredictable variable that threatened the delicate balance the world government worked so tirelessly to maintain. In the hallowed halls of Marineford, Fleet Admiral Sakazuki, better known by his moniker, Akainu, slammed a fist on his desk, the wood groaning under the force of the blow. The barely contained magma of his devil fruit power caused a stack of reports to smolder at the edges. "Unacceptable," he growled, his voice a low rumble of volcanic fury. His face, permanently set in a grim scowl, was darker than usual. The Vinsmokes were a contained threat. Now they are running rampant with a weapon of unknown origin and classification. They have humiliated a Yonko and destabilized the entire region. This flagrant display of power will not be tolerated. Standing before him, calm and composed amidst the palpable heat of the fleet admiral's rage, was Admiral Kizaru. He was, as always, the picture of nonchalant disinterest, his hands in the pockets of his signature yellow-striped suit. "Oh, scary," Kizaru drawled, a lazy smile on his face. "But what can we do, Sakazuki? They're in the heart of the new world. Sending a buster call is messy. And it might not even work, if the reports about this new fellow are even half true." "I am not ordering a buster call," Akainu snarled, rising from his chair. His towering frame cast a long, menacing shadow. "I want a surgical strike. A decapitation. You, Kizaru. Take a fleet. Find the Germa kingdom. Your power is the perfect counter to a speed-based opponent. You will go there and you will eliminate this Naruto Uzumaki. Capture Judge and his whelps. Show the world what happens when rogue science challenges absolute justice." Kizaru's smile didn't falter, but a dangerous light glinted behind his tinted spectacles. A direct assignment from the fleet admiral himself. How exciting. I suppose I'll need a few vice admirals to handle the cleanup. Take whomever you need, Akainu dismissed, turning to stare out his window at the bustling naval base below. Just get it done. I want the head of this golden maelstrom on my desk by the end of the week. Leash the red dog, Kizaru. Remind the Vinsmokes who holds the chain. The Germa kingdom, meanwhile, was a hive of frantic activity. The information about the Void Sovereign and its agent had shaken the nation to its core. Dr. Koji and his science division worked around the clock, trying to analyze the data, to understand the nature of the null field, to find a weakness. Judge had sequestered himself, poring over the combat logs, his mind racing to reconcile the failure of his technology with the terrifying potential of this new cosmic threat. For Naruto, the days were a blur of frustration. He felt responsible. He had led this thing here. He spent hours training, pushing his depleted chakra reserves, trying to hone his sage mode to be more efficient, to draw in natural energy faster. He needed to be stronger, not just for himself, but for this new world he had inadvertently endangered. The forced engagement had become a strange, unspoken reality. He and Reiju were seen together frequently, poring over maps and sensor data related to the void anomaly. To the outside world, it looked like a royal couple preparing for war. To them, it was a partnership born of necessity. The easy camaraderie they'd found on the mission had deepened, forged in the shared horror of what they'd witnessed on that gray island. They were on the observation deck of the main snail, looking out at the endless blue of the Grand Line, when the alarms began to blare. Multiple contacts approaching at high speed, a voice screamed over the intercom. Bearing 270. They're marine vessels. 10, no, 20 of them. And one signature, it's massive. It's an admiral. Naruto and Reiju exchanged a look. The world had come knocking. On the main view screen in the command center, the image resolved. A massive fleet of marine warships was bearing down on them, their white sails emblazoned with the symbol of the seagull. They were arranged in a perfect pincer formation, designed to box the Germa kingdom in. At their head was a single, smaller vessel, and on its prow stood a tall, lanky figure in a bright yellow suit. Admiral Kizaru, Reiju breathed, her voice tight. Also known as Borsalino. He ate the Pika Pika no Mi, the Glint Glint fruit. He's a Logia user who can turn his body into light, move at the speed of light, and fire devastating energy beams. He's considered one of the fastest and most dangerous men in the world. Naruto's eyes narrowed on the figure. Speed of light. That was a problem. Even his sage-enhanced senses would have trouble tracking that. He's not here for a war, Naruto said, his gaze sweeping over the fleet's formation. Look at them. They're boxing us in, but they're not preparing for a full-scale bombardment. This is an assassination. He looked at Reiju. He's here for me. Judge's voice boomed from his throne. All ships, battle stations. Activate defensive protocols. Niji, Yanji, scramble your squadrons. Ichiji, you are in command of the fleet's defense. Do not let them get a clear shot at the kingdom. The Germa kingdom transformed. Hatches opened, revealing thousands of cannons. Squadrons of Germa soldiers on flying jetpacks took to the skies, forming a defensive perimeter. The entire nation bristled, becoming a floating fortress. Kizaru, observing this from his ship, just gave a lazy smile. Ooh, they're all fired up. How troublesome. He raised a finger, and a tiny pinpoint of golden light appeared on its tip. Better say hello. He fired. A beam of pure, concentrated light, no thicker than a pencil, shot across the miles of ocean in an instant. It wasn't aimed at the ships. It was aimed at a Germa soldier flying at the edge of their formation. The beam struck the soldier's jetpack. The resulting explosion was catastrophic, a brilliant flash of light and fire that vaporized the soldier and the half-dozen men flying near him. It was a statement. I can hit any of you, at any time, from anywhere. Panic rippled through the Germa forces. How could they fight something they couldn't even see coming? He's toying with us, Ichiji said through the comms, his voice strained. His attacks are instantaneous. Our shields can't react in time. Naruto knew he couldn't let this continue. The Germa soldiers were being picked off one by one, Kizaru firing lazy beams of light from his distant ship, each one finding its mark with terrifying precision. Morale was plummeting. Reiju, Naruto said, his voice low and serious. Take command. I need you to do something for me. What is it? She asked, her eyes wide with concern. While I'm fighting him, he'll be focused on me. That's your window. I don't care about the small ships. I need you to take out the Vice Admiral's command vessels. Cut the head off the snake. Can you do that? She looked at the chaotic battlefield, at the terrifying power of the Admiral, and then at the unwavering confidence in Naruto's eyes. She nodded, her resolve hardening. I can. Good. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't get hurt this time. Before she could reply, he vanished from the command center. He reappeared on the outer shell of the kingdom, standing on the head of the lead snail. He faced the marine fleet alone, a single figure in orange and black against the backdrop of a massive metal fortress. He took a deep breath and let his chakra explode outwards. But this time, it wasn't the bubbling crimson of Kurama's rage. It was a pure, brilliant gold, the color of the sun. He drew on the six-path sage mode, the ultimate power gifted to him by the sage himself. The whisker marks on his cheeks became sharp and defined, a black coat materialized over his clothes, and behind him, 9 black spheres, the truth-seeking orbs, hovered silently. His entire being radiated an aura of immense, divine power that pushed back against the very air. Across the water, Kizaru's lazy smile finally faltered. He lowered his hand, his eyes widening behind his glasses. That energy, it was immense. It felt ancient, powerful, holy. Oh, my, he whispered. This is unexpected. Naruto didn't waste time with words. He raised a hand, and one of the truth-seeking orbs flattened into a black staff. He pointed it at Kizaru. You're here for me, Naruto's voice boomed across the water, amplified by his chakra. So come and get me. Leave them out of it. Kizaru chuckled, his confidence returning. So polite. Very well. In a flash of brilliant yellow light, he was gone from the deck of his ship. Naruto's sage-enhanced senses screamed. He didn't see Kizaru, but he felt the path of his light. He spun, his black staff swinging in a defensive arc clang. The sound was deafening. Kizaru had reformed, his leg transformed into pure light, aimed in a devastating kick. But it had been blocked. Not by the staff itself, but by the truth-seeking orb at its tip. The black sphere, capable of negating all forms of ninjutsu, had met Kizaru's light-based attack and stopped it dead. The Admiral's Logia body, which should have been intangible, had been treated as a physical object. Kizaru's eyes were wide with genuine shock. He had been touched. He, who was made of light, had been blocked by solid matter. How? He began. Naruto gave him no time to recover. He pushed forward, his staff a blur of black. The battle that followed was a spectacle that defied comprehension. It was a clash of gods. Kizaru would dissolve into a particle of light, reappearing hundreds of feet away to fire a barrage of laser beams. Yata no Kagami, he would cry. But Naruto, his senses tracking the Admiral's movements not as light, but as energy, would be there, a truth-seeking orb expanding into a shield to absorb the blasts. The sky became their battlefield. Kizaru moved as light, streaking across the clouds in blinding flashes. Naruto flew, propelled by the power of the six paths, a golden comet chasing a yellow star. Their clashes sent shockwaves that roiled the sea below, creating massive whirlpools. The sound was a continuous, deafening roar of explosions and sonic booms. From the bridge of the Germa kingdom, Reiju watched in awe and terror. She had seen Naruto's power before, but this was different. This wasn't a desperate defense, it was a battle of equals. He was fighting a marine admiral to a standstill. Then she remembered his words. "That's your window." She shook off her awe, her mind snapping into focus. "All units," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority through the comms. "Target the Vice Admiral's flagships. Concentrate all fire. Now." The Germa forces, who had been watching the skyborne battle with a mixture of fear and hope, were galvanized by her command. With Kizaru completely occupied, the tide of the battle below began to turn. The Germa cannons, their technology far superior to the Marines, began to land devastating blows. Squadrons led by Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji, emboldened by their enemies' disarray, launched vicious, targeted strikes. They fought with a ferocity they hadn't shown before, inspired by the lone golden figure fighting for them in the sky. One by one, the Marine Command ships were crippled, their vice admirals forced to focus on damage control rather than the assault. The pincer formation broke. The Marines were in chaos. High above, the battle reached its zenith. "You are truly a monster," Kizaru said, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. His lazy demeanor was gone, replaced by a grim focus. He had never been pushed this hard. But everything that is light can be bent. He brought his hands together, and an immense amount of light energy began to gather. The very sky seemed to brighten. "Alma no Murakumo," he yelled, forming a long, beautiful sword made of pure, solidified light. Naruto responded in kind. He raised his hand, and a massive amount of chakra swirled into it. Sage Art, Magnet Release Rasengan. The familiar Rasengan formed, but this time it was infused with the Shikaku's sealing patterns, designed specifically to bind and restrain. They charged at each other one last time. Light soared against sealing sphere. The resulting explosion was not a sound, but a wave of pure, silent white light that washed over the entire battlefield. Everyone, Marine and Germa alike, was blinded. When their vision returned, they saw Kizaru staggering back, his light sword shattered. Naruto was hovering, breathing heavily, the Rasengan gone. He hadn't beaten the Admiral. He hadn't even truly injured him. But he had fought him to a complete and utter standstill. He had proven that Kizaru could not defeat him, and with the Marine fleet in disarray below, the Admiral's mission was a total failure. Kizaru looked down at his broken fleet. He looked at the golden-robed young man hovering before him, radiating an energy that felt fundamentally opposed to his own. He let out a long, weary sigh. "Well now," he said, his lazy drawl returning, though it sounded forced. "This has been, most illuminating. But I'm afraid I have other appointments." He dissolved into a single particle of light and shot back towards the remains of his flagship. A moment later, the retreat signal was given. The Marine fleet, battered and broken, turned and fled. They had won. The Germa kingdom erupted in a deafening cheer. The soldiers, who had been terrified moments before, were now screaming in triumph. They weren't cheering for Germa or for their king. They were cheering for the golden figure descending from the sky. Naruto landed softly on the command deck, the six paths sage mode receding, leaving him looking tired but unharmed. The 9 truth-seeking orbs dissolved into nothingness. He had used a significant portion of his finite divine power, but it had been worth it. He was immediately surrounded by his clones, who had been directing the civilian population to shelters, all of whom dispelled, flooding his mind with their experiences, the fear, the hope, the gratitude of the non-combatant families he had protected. The Vinsmoke siblings approached him. Niji and Yanji looked at him with a new, grudging respect. They still hated him, but they respected his power. Ichiji was silent, but his analytical gaze held a flicker of something akin to awe. Reiju walked right up to him, her helmet retracting. Her face was flushed with adrenaline and victory. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him in a tight, desperate hug. "You did it," she whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." Naruto was startled for a moment, then he relaxed, returning the hug. "We did it," he corrected. "Your plan worked. You took them apart while he was busy with me." They pulled away, but she kept her hands on his shoulders, her violet eyes shining. They had declared war on the world government, the single most powerful organization on the planet, and they had won their first battle decisively. They hadn't just survived, they had established themselves. They were no longer just a rogue nation. They were a new, independent world power, a force to be reckoned with. And at the center of it all was the impossible boy who had fallen from the sky. Judge watched the scene from his throne room monitor. He saw his daughter's shining eyes. He saw his son's grudging respect. He saw his soldiers cheering for an outsider. His plan to bind Naruto to him was working, but it was also backfiring spectacularly. He was not gaining a weapon. He was losing a kingdom. The hearts and minds of his people were turning towards this golden maelstrom, this embodiment of sentiment and power he could not comprehend. And for the first time in his life, Vinsmoke Judge felt the cold, unfamiliar chill of being left behind by history. Chapter 6, A Brother's Shadow. The news traveled the way all monumental news did in the Grand Line, carried by news coups on the winds, spreading from island to island like a wildfire. The headlines were bold, sensational, and world-shaking. Germa 66 declares war on world government. Admiral Kizaru repulsed in New World Clash. Mysterious new power, Naruto Uzumaki fights Admiral to a standstill. A new emperor on the rise? The accompanying photograph was grainy, taken from a distance by a brave or foolish journalist, but it was unmistakable. A golden figure radiating divine light, locked in combat with the blinding yellow form of a marine admiral, the sky itself seeming to break around them. On the deck of the Thousand Sunny, as it bobbed gently in the calm waters near Zou, Sanji stared at the newspaper, his cigarette forgotten between his fingers, its ash growing long and precarious. His face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger. Disbelief. A sliver of pride he would never admit to. And a deep, gnawing worry. He had left them. He had made his choice, his family was the crew of the Straw Hat Pirates, his captain the man who would be king of the pirates. He had turned his back on the cold, metallic cage of his past, content to let it rust and decay. But his past refused to stay buried. First, the disastrous Tea Party, where he'd been forced to confront their treachery and his own foolish sentimentality. Now this. His father, his brothers, his sister, they had not only survived, but they had picked a fight with the entire world. And at the center of it all was the strange, blonde man who had fallen from the sky. The man who had saved them. "Hey, Sanji, you okay?" Luffy asked, his mouth full of food. He peered at the newspaper in Sanji's hand. "Whoa! Look at that! A big shiny guy fighting Yellow Monkey." So cool. It's not cool, you idiot, Usopp said, his voice trembling as he read over Sanji's shoulder. They've declared war on the world government. That's insane. That's even crazier than anything we've ever done. He fought an admiral to a draw, Zoro muttered from his napping spot against the mast, one eye cracked open. His hand rested on the hilt of his Wado Ikemonji. He wasn't looking at the picture of the fight, but at the name printed in the article. Naruto Uzumaki. What a mouthful. Sanji crumpled the newspaper in his fist, the sound sharp and violent. The conflict inside him was a raging sea. He hated them. He hated everything Judge stood for, the cruelty of his brothers, the soulless kingdom they commanded. But Reiju, she had been the one spark of kindness in his miserable childhood. She was the one who had tended his wounds, the one who had helped him escape. The thought of her being caught in a war against the entire world, it was a weight on his soul. And this Naruto. This stranger who wielded godlike power. The paper said he was now Germa's champion, that there were even rumors of an engagement to Reiju. Sanji's teeth gritted so hard his jaw ached. Were they using him? Had his father found the ultimate weapon, a replacement for the son who had been a failure? Was this man just another one of Judge's puppets, a monster propping up a kingdom of monsters? He couldn't stand it. The not knowing. The fear for his sister. The rage at his father. He stood up, his face set in a grim, determined mask. Luffy. Luffy swallowed his massive bite of food. Yeah. I have to go, Sanji said, his voice low and steady. I have to see this for myself. I have to know if she's safe. Nami's eyes widened. Sanji, are you crazy? After everything that happened? They'll kill you. They won't, Sanji said, a bitter smile on his face. They see me as a failure, not a threat. And besides, he looked out at the horizon, in the direction his Vivre card for Reiju would lead him. I'm not going there to fight them. I'm going there to confront him. Luffy was quiet for a moment, just looking at his cook. He saw the turmoil, the loyalty to his crew warring with the lingering, painful bonds of family. He broke into a wide grin. Okay. But you'd better come back. I'll get hungry. It was the highest vote of confidence his captain could give. Sanji nodded, a lump in his throat. He used a skywalk to leave a note for Zeph, then borrowed a small, one-person waver from the Sunny's hold. He didn't look back. He set his course for the last known coordinates of the Germa kingdom, a lone figure cutting through the waves, a shadow from the past racing to confront the explosive present. He found them 3 days later, in a stretch of ocean that had become their de facto territory. The Germa kingdom was no longer just a collection of ships, it was a heavily fortified mobile fortress. Patrols of soldiers on jetpacks swarmed the skies. Long-range cannons were visible on every platform. They were a nation on high alert, daring the world to take another shot. Sanji's small waver was detected miles out. A squadron of soldiers, their uniforms a stark, emotionless white, descended to intercept him. State your purpose, their leader commanded, his voice modulated and robotic. I'm here to see my family, Sanji said, his voice laced with old venom. He held up his hands, showing he was unarmed. Tell Judge that his third son, the failure, has come home for a visit. The message was relayed. Sanji waited, floating on the waves, surrounded by armed soldiers. He expected to be blasted out of the water. Instead, a new voice came over their leader's comm. It was Reiju. Let him through. Escort him to the central command deck. Unarmed. The soldiers parted, forming an escort as Sanji guided his waver towards the colossal snail ship. Landing on the cold, metallic deck felt like stepping back into a nightmare. The air was the same, sterile and cold. The soldiers moved with the same robotic precision. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Reiju was waiting for him. She wasn't in her raid suit, but in a simple, elegant white dress. Her expression was, as always, a carefully constructed mask of calm, but Sanji could see the surprise and worry in her eyes. "Sanji," she said, her voice soft. "What are you doing here? It isn't safe." "I read the papers," he said, his voice tight. He gestured around at the bristling fortress. "Declared war on the world government. Fought an admiral. Are you all insane?" "We didn't start this war," she replied evenly. "They came for us. We simply defended ourselves." "With him," Sanji bit out. "This Naruto. Where is he?" As if summoned, a cheerful voice cut in. "Right here. Hey, cook. Didn't expect to see you again so soon." Naruto walked onto the deck from a nearby corridor. He was wearing his usual casual clothes, a plate piled high with roasted meat in one hand. He had a relaxed, easygoing smile on his face, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He noted the tension between the siblings, the armed escort, Sanji's aggressive posture. Sanji turned on him, his eyes blazing. You're the one. The Vinsmoke's new pet." Naruto took a large bite of meat and chewed thoughtfully before answering. "Pet? Nah. I'm more of a business partner. An unwilling one, mostly." He swallowed. "And they prefer to call it an engagement." The words hit Sanji like a physical blow. He stared at Reiju, his face a mask of betrayal. "Engagement? You're marrying him? This stranger?" "It's a political arrangement, Sanji," Reiju said, her voice pleading for him to understand. "Father's idea. A way to bind him to us." "So I was right," Sanji snarled, his gaze snapping back to Naruto. He pointed a trembling finger at him. "You're just a tool. A means to an end for my father's insane ambitions. How could you? After everything I told you about them, about what they are. How could you let yourself become their weapon?" Naruto's smile faded. He set the plate of food down on a nearby railing. "First of all," he said, his voice losing its cheerful edge, "no one tells me what to do. Not your dad, not the Marines, nobody. Second, I'm not their weapon." He took a step forward, his presence suddenly feeling much larger, much more dangerous. "I'm here because I don't like bullies. And your family was about to get wiped out by a really big one. I did what I had to do. By propping up a kingdom of them." Sanji shot back, his anger boiling over. "You saved a nest of snakes. You've given my father everything he ever wanted, a power great enough to hold the world hostage. You think I don't know that?" Naruto's voice was quiet, but it cut through Sanji's rage like a knife. "I've seen the cloning vats. I've seen the way he treats his own kids. I know exactly what your father is." He looked at Reiju, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. "But I also know that not everyone in that nest is a snake." The implied defense of his sister only fueled Sanji's fury. This man didn't understand. He couldn't. "You don't know anything," Sanji whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "I won't let you do this. I won't let you help them. I'll stop you myself." In a flash, his leg was wreathed in brilliant, searing flame. Diable jam. He shot forward, a blur of black and orange, his kick aimed not to kill, but to send a message. A burning, painful message. Naruto didn't move. He just watched the flaming kick approach, his blue eyes calm and analytical. At the last possible second, he raised a hand. A thin, transparent film of chakra coated his palm. Boom! The impact was explosive. A wave of heat and force erupted from the point of contact, sending a tremor through the deck. Sanji's flaming foot was stopped cold, inches from Naruto's face, caught in his open palm. The flames licked at Naruto's hand, but the chakra shield held, deflecting the heat. Sanji's eyes widened in shock. The force of his diable jam kick could shatter stone and melt steel. To have it stopped so casually, with one hand, it was impossible. "You're fast," Naruto said, his voice calm. "And that leg of yours packs a serious punch. You've gotten stronger." He then tightened his grip on Sanji's ankle. "But you're sloppy. Your anger is making you predictable." With a flick of his wrist, he tossed Sanji's leg aside, throwing the chef off balance. Sanji landed in a crouch, his mind reeling. "Reiju, stay back," Naruto said without looking at her. "This is between us. Stop this, both of you." Reiju cried, but they weren't listening. Sanji pushed off the deck, launching into a furious barrage of kicks. Collier. Epaule. Côtelette. Cell. Each kick was a blur, each one aimed at a vital point, each one wreathed in flame. Naruto moved. He didn't use any flashy techniques. No clones, no Raisengans. It was pure taijutsu, honed in 1,000 battles. He flowed around Sanji's attacks, a leaf on the wind. He would parry a kick with the back of his hand, redirect a flaming arc with a gentle push, sidestep an axe kick with an almost lazy grace. He wasn't just defending, he was controlling the fight, using Sanji's own momentum against him. It was utterly, completely one-sided. Sanji was fighting with all the rage and passion he could muster, and Naruto was treating it like a dance, his movements economical and devastatingly effective. "Is that all?" Naruto asked, ducking under a wide, sweeping kick. "You came all this way to yell at me, and this is all you've got?" The taunt worked. Sanji roared, leaping into the air for his strongest attack. Pole a fryer, Spectre. He flipped, using the momentum to bring his heel down like a guillotine, the flames on his foot burning white-hot. This time, Naruto didn't dodge. He met the attack. He channeled chakra to his own foot and kicked upwards. There was no flame, no flashy effect. Just pure, concentrated power. Their feet met in mid-air with a sound like a thunderclap. A shockwave erupted from the point of impact, cracking the metal deck plates beneath them. Sanji cried out in pain, a pained grunt forced from his lips. He was thrown backwards, tumbling through the air and crashing hard against the far railing of the ship. He slumped to the ground, his leg throbbing with a pain so intense it made his vision swim. It felt like he had kicked a mountain. Naruto landed softly, not a hair out of place. He walked over to the panting chef, his expression no longer angry, but filled with a quiet, firm conviction. He knelt down so they were eye to eye. "I get it," Naruto said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You're scared for your sister. You're angry that the people who hurt you are getting stronger. You think I'm just another monster helping them." He leaned in closer. "But you're wrong. I'm not here for him," he said, gesturing vaguely towards the towering central spire where Judge's throne room was. "I'm here for her." His gaze flickered to Reiju, who stood watching, her hands clasped to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. He looked back at Sanji. "Your family is a mess. My family was a whole village that hated my guts for something I couldn't control. We don't get to choose where we come from. But we do get to choose who we protect." He stood up, towering over the defeated cook. "Reiju is trying to change this place. To make it something better. And I'm going to help her. Whether you or your father or the whole damn world likes it or not." The raw, unshakable sincerity in his voice, the fierce loyalty in his eyes. Sanji had seen that look before. He saw it in Luffy's eyes every time he declared he would be king of the pirates. He saw it in Zoro's when he swore he would become the world's greatest swordsman. It was the look of a man who had made an unbreakable promise. Sanji's anger finally broke, replaced by a wave of weary resignation. He had come here to fight a monster, a weapon. But he was wrong. This man wasn't a tool. He was a force of nature with a will of iron, and that will was currently aligned with his sister's. He didn't have to like it. But he couldn't deny the truth of what he was seeing. He struggled to his feet, leaning against the railing. He looked from Naruto to his sister, who was now tentatively approaching. "This is a mistake," Sanji said, his voice raspy. "You don't know them. You don't know what they're capable of." He looked at Naruto, a final, desperate plea in his eyes. "If you let them turn you into one of them, if you let them corrupt you, I'll be the one to take you down. I swear it." It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a warning. A promise between two men who, in their own way, cared for the same person. Naruto nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Sanji turned to leave, his shoulders slumped. He had his answer. It wasn't the one he wanted, but it was one he could, for now, live with. "Sanji, wait." Reiju called out. He paused at the edge of the deck, near his waver, but he didn't turn around. "I'm not one of you, Reiju. I can't stay here." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "Just, be safe." He gave a slight nod, then leaped down to his small craft and sped away, not looking back. Reiju watched him go, a single tear tracing a familiar path down her cheek until he was just a speck on the horizon. A wave of loneliness washed over her, the chasm between her past and her present feeling wider than ever. She felt a warm, strong hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Naruto standing beside her, his expression soft. "He loves you," he said simply. The words were a balm on her wounded heart. She nodded, unable to speak, and leaned her head against his shoulder for just a moment, drawing strength from his quiet, unwavering presence. They both understood the pain of complicated family ties, of bonds that were both a burden and a blessing. The confrontation was over, but something had been settled. Sanji had seen Naruto's conviction. And Naruto had declared, in no uncertain terms, where his loyalty lay. Not with Germa. Not with Judge. But with the woman standing beside him. The unspoken alliance, the fake engagement, had just been cemented by something far stronger, a shared purpose, witnessed and reluctantly acknowledged by the shadow of a brother. Chapter 7, The Unfeeling King. The confrontation with Sanji left an indelible mark on the Germa kingdom. It was a private affair, yet its repercussions were felt by all. The soldiers who witnessed it spoke in hushed tones of how their king's estranged son had been effortlessly defeated by the queen's fiancé. They spoke of Naruto's declaration, a direct statement of loyalty to Reiju that implicitly bypassed the throne. The silent, unthinking devotion of the Germa army was beginning to fracture, replaced by a growing, whispered admiration for the strange, charismatic powerhouse who fought for them and the princess who was finally beginning to lead them. Vinsmoke Judge saw it all. From his throne, he monitored every comm channel, every security feed, every patrol report. He saw the way his soldiers looked at Naruto. He saw the way his daughter looked at Naruto. He saw the easy camaraderie between them, the shared glances, the quiet conversations over tactical maps. He had intended the engagement to be a leash, a way to chain Naruto's power to his ambitions. Instead, it had become a conduit, transferring loyalty and influence from himself to them. Naruto was not becoming a prince of Germa. He was creating a new center of gravity, pulling the entire kingdom into his orbit. Reiju, his own daughter, his most perfect creation next to Ichiji, was drifting away from him, her mind filled with dangerous, sentimental notions of reform and a better way. The final straw came during a strategy meeting. Judge was outlining a plan for a series of aggressive strikes into territory formerly held by Big Mom, a way to solidify their new position as a world power. "These raids will be swift and brutal," Judge declared, his voice echoing in the throne room. "We will seize their resources, absorb their territories, and make an example of any who resist. It is the logical path to expansion." "No," Reiju said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the room with the force of a thunderclap. Niji and Yanji, flanking the throne, stared at her in shock. Ichiji's eyebrow twitched. Judge turned his cold, furious gaze on his daughter. "What did you say?" "I said no," Reiju repeated, her voice stronger this time. She stood beside Naruto, her posture straight and defiant. "We will not be common pillagers. We just repelled the world government. The world is watching. If we act like tyrants, we prove them right. We should be offering protection, forging alliances through diplomacy, not conquest. We should be building something, not just taking it." Naruto nodded in agreement. "She's right. You can't build a real kingdom on fear. It'll rot from the inside out." The public defiance, the united front, it was too much. Judge's carefully controlled facade finally cracked. He saw his life's work, his entire philosophy of power, being dismantled before his eyes by his own daughter and the stray dog he'd taken in. The boy's sentimentality was a virus, and Reiju was the patient zero. "You are a fool, Reiju," Judge spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Blinded by this boy's simplistic morality. You have forgotten your purpose. You have forgotten what you are." He raised a hand, a heavy, ornate ring on his finger glinting in the light. "Perhaps you need a reminder." A strange, high-frequency signal, inaudible to Naruto, pulsed from the ring. Reiju gasped, a sharp, ragged intake of breath. Her hands flew to her temples, and her knees buckled. A searing, white-hot pain lanced through her skull. It was not a physical pain, but a violation of her very being. It was the feeling of her own will, her own thoughts, being brutally overwritten by an external command. The genetic failsafe her father had built into them. The absolute obedience protocol. Her mother's sacrifice, the drug that had preserved her emotions, was now her torment. Her natural heart and mind fought desperately against the intrusive code, creating an agony of psychic feedback. "Father, stop," she pleaded, her voice a strained whisper as she sank to her knees. Naruto was at her side in an instant, his hands hovering over her, unsure of how to help. "Reiju. What's wrong? What did you do to her?" he snarled at Judge, his eyes blazing with a cold, murderous fury. "I am merely reasserting control," Judge said, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across his face. He watched his daughter's struggle with a detached satisfaction. "Her emotions are a design flaw, one I have been too lenient in tolerating. It is time for a factory reset." The signal intensified. Reiju screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure agony. That scream shattered something inside Naruto. He saw her pain, her violation. He saw a father torturing his own child for daring to have a heart. And the last thread of his restraint snapped. The temperature in the room plummeted. A pressure, heavy and suffocating, descended on the throne room. It was not the warm, brilliant gold of his sage mode, nor the furious red of Kurama's chakra. It was a cold, silent, killing intent, so pure and so potent that it felt like a physical weight. Niji and Yanji, who had been smirking at their sister's plight, suddenly felt a terror so profound it stole the air from their lungs. Their bodies froze, their instincts screaming at them that they were in the presence of an apex predator about to strike. "You," Naruto whispered, his voice dangerously calm as he rose to his full height, his gaze locked on Judge, "are going to turn that off. Now." Judge met his gaze, his smile faltering slightly at the sheer killing intent rolling off the boy. But he held his ground, arrogant in his position. "You are in my kingdom, boy. You will not dictate terms to me. Ichiji, Niji, Yanji. Subdue him. Show him the futility of resistance." His sons, for the first time, hesitated. Their bodies screamed at them not to move, not to provoke the monster before them. "Now!" Judge roared, his own command overriding their instinctual fear. With the ingrained obedience of a lifetime, they moved. Their raid suits materialized around them in flashes of red, blue, and green. They were no longer the arrogant princes from the training room. They were weapons, their expressions blank, their movements precise and robotic. Their father's command had stripped them of their personalities, leaving only the perfect soldiers beneath. They attacked as one. A coordinated, flawless assault from three sides. Ichiji fired a piercing beam of light, Niji unleashed a torrent of electricity, and Yanji charged, his fist extended like a battering ram. Naruto didn't even look at them. He raised a hand, and a single truth-seeking orb shot from his back, expanding into a black, spherical shield that enveloped both him and the kneeling Reiju. The three attacks slammed into the shield simultaneously. The light beam dissipated. The electricity was negated. Yanji's punch met the black sphere and was stopped dead, the force of his own blow rattling every bone in his body. The shield contracted, and Naruto stepped out from behind it, leaving Reiju protected within the black bubble. His eyes were no longer blue. They were the crimson, slitted eyes of Kurama, burning with a cold, controlled rage. "I'm only going to say this once," he growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "Get out of my way." They attacked again, their movements perfectly synchronized. A dance of death learned in 1,000 simulations. But they were fighting a god of war. Naruto moved. He flowed between their attacks, a phantom of righteous fury. He didn't use Razengans or grand, destructive techniques. This was personal. This was punishment. He appeared behind Niji, his movements too fast for the prince's enhanced senses to track. He didn't strike with his fist. He used 2 fingers, jabbing them into the back of Niji's neck at a precise point where the suit's neural interface connected to his spine. "Gentle fist," he whispered, a technique he had copied from Niji years ago. Niji's suit sparked violently and then went dead. The prince collapsed, his body convulsing as his nervous system was temporarily short-circuited. One down. Yanji lunged, trying to grab him. Naruto ducked under the clumsy attack, grabbing Yanji's extended arm. He spun, using the larger man's momentum against him, and slammed him headfirst into Ichiji, who was preparing another blast. The two brothers crashed together in a heap of tangled limbs and sparking armor. Naruto crossed his fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 clones appeared, surrounding the downed princes. They didn't attack. They just stood there, their crimson eyes glowing in the dim light of the throne room, an army of silent, menacing demons. The message was clear. This fight is already over. The real Naruto walked past them, his steps slow and deliberate, each footfall echoing like a death knell in the silent throne room. He walked towards the dais, towards the king who sat on his throne, his face now pale with a mixture of rage and dawning, abject terror. "You hide behind your children," Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. "You use them, you torture them, you treat them like things. You're not a king. You're just a coward." Judge, his hands trembling, fumbled for the spear that rested beside his throne. He brandished it at Naruto, its tip glowing with energy. "Stay back. I am Vinsmoke Judge. I am the pinnacle of science. I am a king." Naruto didn't even slow down. He walked right up to the spear. He didn't dodge it. He let Judge thrust it at his chest. The spear, a weapon that could pierce battleship armor, hit Naruto's chest and stopped. A faint golden shimmer of 6 paths chakra, visible for only a second, had deflected it. Naruto looked down at the spear tip pressed against his sternum, then back up at Judge, his expression one of pure, unadulterated disappointment. He grabbed the shaft of the spear. With a single, effortless twist of his wrist, he snapped the technologically advanced weapon in two. The sound of its breaking echoed the shattering of Judge's pride. Naruto tossed the broken pieces aside. He reached out, not with a fist, but with an open hand, and grabbed Judge by the ornate collar of his royal attire. He lifted the king from his throne, dangling him in the air as if he weighed nothing. Judge struggled, his legs kicking uselessly. For the first time in his adult life, he was utterly, completely powerless. He was at the mercy of another being, his science, his army, his very kingdom useless to save him. Power isn't something you command, Naruto said, his voice a low growl, his crimson eyes boring into Judge's terrified ones. It's not something you build in a lab or beat into your children. He brought the king's face close to his own. It's something you inspire in others. A bond. Something a pathetic, lonely old man like you will never understand. He didn't kill him. Death was too quick, too merciful. He wanted to break him. He wanted to shatter the philosophy that had caused Reiju so much pain. He threw Judge back onto his dais. The king landed in a heap amidst the wreckage of his broken spear and his shattered dignity. He was no longer a king. He was just a man. Old and defeated, surrounded by the ruins of his own hubris. Naruto turned his back on him. The clones guarding the princes dispelled into smoke. He walked back to the black sphere that was protecting Reiju. He placed a hand on it, and the truth-seeking orb dissolved, flowing back to its place behind him. Reiju was conscious, the agonizing pain gone, but she was trembling, curled into a ball on the floor. The aftershocks of her father's violation still racked her body. Naruto knelt beside her, the cold fury in his eyes melting away, replaced by a gentle, overwhelming concern. He reached out, not to her mind or her suit, but to her very life force. He let his six paths chakra flow into her, a warm, golden light that was the antithesis of her father's cold, cruel signal. He wasn't just healing her, he was searching for the source of her pain. He found it. A complex string of genetic code, a command pathway woven into her DNA. It was elegant, brilliant, and utterly monstrous. With a surge of focused energy, a feat of chakra control more delicate and precise than any medical ninjutsu, he targeted the code. He didn't destroy it. He severed its connection to her nervous system, wrapping it in a layer of inert chakra, isolating it permanently. He had just freed her. Not just for now. Forever. As the last of his chakra settled, Reiju's trembling stopped. She looked up at him, her violet eyes wide with a dawning, breathtaking realization of what he had just done. He hadn't just saved her. He had given her back her own soul. Slowly, she rose to her feet. She looked at her brothers, unconscious on the floor, their suits deactivated. She looked at her father, a broken man weeping amidst the ruins of his throne. And she looked at the silent Germa soldiers who had witnessed the entire event from the doorways, their expressions no longer blank, but filled with awe and a dawning, revolutionary loyalty. She was free. For the first time in her life, she was truly, completely free. She turned to Naruto, who stood watching her, his six paths mode fading, leaving him looking tired but resolute. She walked to him, her step steady and sure. She took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. The touch was not one of a damsel in distress. It was the touch of a partner. An equal. She then turned to face the assembled soldiers, her voice ringing out in the silent throne room, clear and strong and filled with a power her father had never possessed. "My father's reign is over," she declared. "From this day forward, Germa has a new leader." Her gaze swept over her people, and then came to rest on Naruto, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. A new era begins now. It was not a coup. It was a revolution. And it had been won not by an army, but by a single act of love and defiance. Chapter 8, The Emperor's Fury. The revolution was swift and surprisingly bloodless. The Germa kingdom, a nation built on the foundation of absolute obedience to a single will, had found a new will to follow. Reiju's declaration, made in the wake of Judge's utter humiliation, was not challenged. The soldiers, whose loyalty had already been shifting, embraced it. They had witnessed Naruto's righteous fury and Reiju's quiet strength. They had seen their unfeeling king broken. For the first time, they were being asked to fight for leaders, not a master. It was a concept so novel it was intoxicating. Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji awoke to a new reality. Their father was confined to his quarters, a king with no subjects, stripped of all authority. Their sister was in command. Naruto, the outsider they despised, was her undisputed champion and partner. For Neji and Yanji, it was a bitter pill to swallow, their pride warring with the terrifying memory of Naruto's power. They fell in line, sullen and resentful, but obedient. Ichiji was different. He was a pragmatist. He had seen his father's philosophy fail and their kingdom nearly annihilated twice. He had also seen Naruto fight an admiral to a standstill and Reiju command a fleet to a decisive victory. With cold, detached logic, he analyzed the situation and came to an irrefutable conclusion: under Reiju and Naruto, Germa's probability of survival and prosperity had increased exponentially. He offered his loyalty to his sister not with warmth, but with a curt, professional nod. It was the most logical course of action. The kingdom began to change. Under Reiju's command, the cloning vats were put on indefinite standby. The brutal training simulations were replaced with tactical drills that emphasized teamwork and protecting one another. It was a slow, arduous process, like trying to teach a machine to have a soul, but a flicker of something new, esprit de corps, began to take root. Naruto, for his part, found himself in an unfamiliar role. He was not a leader, not in the way Reiju was. He was a symbol. A guardian. He spent his days sparring with the soldiers, teaching them the basics of hand-to-hand combat, showing them that strength wasn't just about technology. He became a common sight in the mess hall, laughing and sharing meals, breaking down the rigid hierarchy of the old regime with his easygoing charisma. He was the heart of the new Germa, Reiju was its mind. But the world does not wait for revolutions to settle. In the opulent, candy-coated capital of Whole Cake Island, a storm was brewing. Big Mom had recovered. Her physical wounds had healed, but her pride remained shattered. The humiliation she had suffered was absolute. She, a Yonko, had been wounded, her plans ruined, her commanders defeated, not by another emperor or the full might of the Marines, but by the pathetic Vinsmokes and a single, unknown boy. Her reputation was in tatters. Laughter and whispers followed her name in the underworld. Her rage was a living thing, a palpable force that warped the weather around Tato land. The homies, her animated objects, trembled in fear. Her children walked on eggshells. Germa, she would roar, her voice shaking the foundations of her castle. Uzumaki. She had been consolidating her power, gathering every ship, every soldier, every last bit of her strength. This would not be a political maneuver or a targeted strike. This was to be an annihilation. An erasure. She would sail to the Germa kingdom, and she would personally sink it to the bottom of the sea, leaving nothing but scrap metal and screams in her wake. She would consume the souls of every last Vinsmoke, and she would feast on the power of the blonde boy who had dared to defy her. The first warning came from a Germa scout patrol on the edge of their territory. Massive fleet sighted. It's Big Mom's armada. All of it. And, oh God. Zeus, Prometheus, she's brought them all. They're at full power. The mood in the Germa command center turned grim. Reiju stood before the holographic map, her face a mask of calm, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the console. The map was a sea of red icons, a colossal fleet converging on their position. It was a force large enough to conquer a country. She's not trying to beat us, Ichiji stated, his voice flat. She's trying to wipe us from existence. Let her try, Yanji muttered, though his bravado was thin. Neji was silent, his face pale. Naruto walked up to stand beside Reiju. He looked at the approaching doom on the map, then at the faces of the Vinsmoke siblings. He saw fear, yes, but he also saw a grim resolve that wasn't there before. Last time, you were her prisoners, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tension. You were divided. Beaten before the fight even started. He swept his gaze across the room. This time, you are the defenders of your home. You fight for each other. For a new future. He placed a hand on Reiju's shoulder, a simple, supportive gesture that spoke volumes. And this time, you have a queen. Reiju looked at him, gratitude and determination shining in her eyes. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was steel. "All ships, prepare for battle," she commanded. "This is not a battle for territory or for pride. This is a battle for our right to exist. We will not fall." The Germa kingdom transformed into a bristling fortress of war. But this time, it was different. There was no panic, no robotic obedience. There was a fierce, defiant energy. They were outnumbered, outgunned by the sheer force of a Yonko, but they were not afraid. The sky darkened as Big Mom's fleet appeared on the horizon. At its head was the Queen Mama Chanter, a ship of monstrous proportions. And floating above it, like malevolent gods, were Prometheus, a sentient sun, and Zeus, a massive thundercloud with a dopey, dangerous grin. Big Mom herself stood on the prow of her ship, her eyes burning with incandescent rage. Napoleon, her bicorn hat, already transformed into a massive, wicked blade. Germa, her voice boomed across the water, a promise of death. "Today, you all die." "A little dramatic, don't you think?" Naruto said to Reiju with a wry grin. He turned to her. "Ready?" She nodded, her pink raid suit materializing around her. "Ready." The battle began. It was not a battle, it was a cataclysm. Big Mom did not bother with cannon fire. She unleashed her homies. Prometheus rained down fireballs the size of houses, turning the sea to steam. Zeus unleashed torrents of lightning that forked across the sky, powerful enough to tear Germa's assault ships in half. But Germa was ready. "Activate thermal shields." Reiju commanded. Energy shields, specifically calibrated to absorb heat, shimmered into existence across the fleet, deflecting the worst of Prometheus's fire. Germa soldiers with experimental lightning rods drew Zeus's attacks away from the main ships, grounding the immense electrical power. It was a brilliant defensive strategy, but it couldn't last forever. The shields were buckling, the rods overloading. They were buying time. "Ichiji, Niji, Yanji." Reiju's voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos. "You know your targets. Go." The three brothers shot from the command ship, streaks of red, blue, and green. They were no longer fighting for their father's approval. They were fighting for their sister, for their home. They moved with a desperate, coordinated fury, leading their squadrons to engage Big Mom's strongest children, Katakuri, Smoothie, Perispero, who were leading the assault. It was a clash of titans, a furious melee in the heart of the storm. "My turn," Naruto said. He crossed his fingers. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 100 clones appeared. "Keep her kids busy. Protect the fleet." The clones roared their ascent and scattered, a wave of orange and black that crashed into the Big Mom pirates, reinforcing the Germa soldiers, evening the odds. Then, the real Naruto took a deep breath. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, the divine power of the six-path sage mode blazed into existence. The golden cloak, the black orbs, it was the form that had challenged an admiral. He turned to Reiju. "I'm going for the head." He launched himself into the sky, a golden meteor aimed directly at Big Mom. The Yonko saw him coming, a grin of pure, bloodthirsty madness spreading across her face. "Yes. Come to me. I'll devour your soul." She leaped from her ship to meet him, her size and weight defying gravity. They clashed in mid-air with a force that created a sonic boom, shaking every ship on the water. What followed was a battle of monsters. Big Mom, empowered by her own fury, swung Napoleon with the force to cleave mountains. Naruto, wielding a staff formed from a truth-seeking orb, met her blow for blow. Their battle was a whirlwind of destruction, a private war in the sky while chaos reigned below. Reiju, her heart in her throat as she watched Naruto fight, forced herself to focus. She was the commander. Her battlefield was the entire ocean. All ships, evasive pattern delta. Draw them into the channel between snails 3 and 4. We're creating a kill box. She was a brilliant strategist, using her kingdom's own geography as a weapon. Her commands were precise, her mind a cold, calculating machine that saw every variable, every opportunity. The Germa fleet moved with a newfound fluidity, luring the chaotic charge of the Big Mom pirates into carefully prepared traps. The technological might of Germa, guided by a brilliant, empathetic mind, was a terrifying thing to behold. High above, Naruto was being pushed back. Big Mom was a force of nature. Every blow from her sword sent jarring shocks through his body. He was faster, more agile, but her raw, indomitable power and stamina were endless. "Kit, you can't win a battle of attrition against her," a voice, deep and familiar, rumbled in his mind. "Not with what we have left." Naruto's eyes widened. "Kurama. You're awake." "Barely," the great fox grumbled. "This overgrown woman's rage is noisy. Now stop playing with your food. You need to end this, and end it now. You have the power of all 9 of us, even if it's just a sliver. Use it." Naruto grinned. "Right." He broke away from Big Mom, putting distance between them. "Hey, big lady," he yelled. "You want my power? Come and get it." He brought his hands together, and the golden chakra of the 6 paths mode exploded outwards. It was no longer just a cloak. It began to form a shape, a colossal form of golden energy that dwarfed even Big Mom's massive frame. A head, a torso, limbs, and 9 lashing tails. The full Kurama avatar, in all its divine, world-breaking glory, materialized over the battlefield. A stunned silence fell over everyone, friend and foe alike. They stared up at the gargantuan golden fox, its sheer presence a testament to a level of power they had never imagined. Its roar was not a sound, but a wave of pure power that washed over them all. Big Mom herself stared, her jaw slack, her rage momentarily forgotten and replaced by a primal, greedy awe. "Magnificent," she breathed. "I must have it." She charged, a monster of flesh and blood against a god of pure energy. From her command post, Reiju watched the golden titan rise and felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. This was the power that had saved them. The power that now fought for them. All forces, her voice rang out, filled with a newfound fire. "Focus your attacks. Push them back. Give him the opening he needs." The battle below intensified, the Germa forces fighting with the fury of zealots, inspired by the golden god in their sky. The Kurama avatar met Big Mom's charge. A colossal, golden-clawed hand swatted her out of the sky. She crashed into one of her own ships, splintering it into 1,000 pieces. She rose from the wreckage, screaming in fury, and leaped back into the fray. The avatar's other hand formed a familiar sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A second, equally massive Kurama avatar materialized beside the first. 2 golden gods now stood on the battlefield. One engaged Big Mom directly, their battle a chaotic storm of destruction. The other turned its attention to her homies. It grabbed Prometheus, the sentient sun, in one massive fist, and with a roar, began to crush it. The sun screamed, its light flickering as its energy was contained. With its other hand, the clone avatar reached for Zeus. The thundercloud, seeing what happened to its brother, yelped in fear and tried to flee, but it was too slow. A massive golden hand closed around it. Then, Naruto did something that shocked everyone. The clone opened its mouth and ate the thundercloud. It drew Zeus's electrical energy into itself, absorbing the homie's power. Inside the original avatar's head, Naruto grinned. "Thanks for the snack." Big Mom, seeing her 2 most powerful weapons neutralized, went berserk. She ignored the avatar and charged at the Germa kingdom itself, her eyes wild. "If I can't have it, I'll destroy everything." "Oh no, you don't," Naruto said. He brought the avatar's hands together. A swirling vortex of black and purple energy began to form, a mixture of positive and negative chakra. It compressed into a dense, crackling sphere. A tailed beast bomb. But he wasn't done. He added his own chakra to it, shaping it, adding wind nature. Blades of pure energy screeched into existence around the sphere, spinning with a deafening shriek. Tailed beast bomb. Raisin shuriken. It was the most powerful technique in his arsenal, a combination of his partner's ultimate attack and his own signature jutsu. An attack that could rewrite maps. He aimed it not at Big Mom, but at a point just in front of her, above the ocean. He fired. The massive, shrieking sphere of destruction shot across the sky. Big Mom, in her blind rage, tried to slice it with Napoleon. It was the last mistake she would make. The moment her sword touched the Raisin shuriken, it detonated. The explosion was absolute. It was not a blast of fire and fury, but a silent, expanding dome of pure, annihilating energy that vaporized everything it touched. The sea beneath it was instantly turned to steam, creating a chasm in the ocean. The shockwave, when it came, was a physical wall of force that capsized half of Big Mom's remaining fleet. Big Mom was caught in the heart of it. Her haki, her nigh invulnerable skin, none of it mattered against a power that unmade matter itself. She was thrown backwards like a rag doll, her body burned and broken, her consciousness shattered. She soared through the air for miles before crashing into the distant waves, defeated and broken, her spirit as shattered as her body. With her defeat, the will of the Big Mom pirates broke completely. They turned and fled, leaderless and terrified, scattering in every direction. The battle was over. The Kurama avatar faded, leaving Naruto floating in the air, panting, the Six Paths Sage mode receding. He was drained, exhausted, but he was victorious. He landed on the deck of the command ship. The cheering was deafening. The Germa soldiers, his former enemies, were chanting his name. Naruto! 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 His brothers-in-law approached, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and something that looked terrifyingly like hero worship. But Naruto only had eyes for one person. Reiju ran to him, her face stained with soot and tears of relief. She didn't hesitate this time. She threw her arms around him and kissed him, a deep, desperate kiss filled with all the terror and triumph of the day, right there on the command deck, in front of her family and her entire kingdom. The cheering intensified. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, her breathing ragged. "You just defeated a Yonko." "We defeated a Yonko," he corrected, his voice tired but happy. They had done the impossible. They had faced the full fury of an emperor and won. They were no longer just a rogue nation or a new power. They were a pillar of the world, a force that had claimed a Yonko's territory and authority by right of conquest. As the cheers of their people washed over them, Naruto and Reiju stood together, partners, leaders, victors. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, their alliance, forged in fire and sealed with a kiss, was no longer a political arrangement. It was a bond, unbreakable and true. The maelstrom had found his home, and the monarch had found her king. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.